Alright guys, let's go ahead and get started. I need to pull up a few things. Hopefully you guys are doing alright. Okay. I still haven't fixed whatever's going on with the audio issues that's going on with OBS. So I can't, because I had this problem with last stream, I can't adjust my headphone volume without adjusting stream volume. Didn't used to be a problem, randomly became a problem. And you might think, oh yeah, well, probably that's an OBS update or something like that. No, haven't updated OBS. So if it's an update problem, it's got to be a Windows update problem, which I have installed some Windows updates in the past few weeks. So maybe that is the issue, but otherwise my headphones work fine. So, but it's like as soon as we pull up OBS, the Windows control for my volume just doesn't do anything, which is very weird. So like I said, I got a couple things I got to set up. So we'll just kind of talk about it as we're kind of going through. Hopefully things are going all right with you. It's been a bit of a slow week. For those of you living in other parts of the world, it is a holiday weekend here in the U.S. It's our Independence Day, so that's fun for us. So a bit of a short week as far as work was concerned. Got some other things kind of going on. So uh, otherwise had some family stuff. So I'm going to be honest, not super prepared for the stream. Though that has been more the regular than the exception. So, take that with a grain of salt. But we do have some things that we're going to talk about today. So, hopefully that should go all right. And we need this guy here, and we're almost done, and then we'll get started on stuff. We'll get started on stuff. All right, there we go, and set this here. And hopefully that should be everything we need. Fingers crossed. All right. Why open this? I don't need that open. All right. I guess let's just go ahead and hop in. So we got a few different topics I want to talk about today, and what do we want to talk about first? Like I said, didn't have any D&D over the past week. Things are a little wonky because of the holidays, people taking off, people got other stuff going on. One of my friends who usually hosts one of our games has been on a cruise, so kind of out of town, so we didn't really have a place to play. We have in that game we have two players who regularly host. Fortunately, I do not have space in my domicile to host. So one of them has been sort of out of the campaign pretty much almost from the very start, simply because they ended up immediately having a scheduling conflict with something else they have going on, which totally understand. So they are kind of on the bench right now as far as their player character is. And even when he comes back, it sounds like they may be only coming back every other week, just because of this scheduling conflict. So we're gonna have to see how that goes. So that's one of them. So, anyways, that hosting solution, that's usually where we've been playing. That person's out, and the other person who has been hosting, gracefully, uh, they are out on their cruise. So we are sort of without a home, a D&D game without a home. And we could have gone and done like a game store or something like that, but it's like we're already down at that point, down to what, three player characters from five. And usually I would play with that, but I also don't love paying to play unless that's like the situation we're setting up. I've definitely played plenty of campaigns at game stores and things like that, but I like that to be set up sort of in the beginning, like that is the understanding of this, not oh, and then every other month we end up playing a one-off at a game store, and then those trying to get a room in our local game store is already kind of difficult, especially on Friday night. Tends to be busy, tends to book up, so and it's a little expensive. Not like crazy, but for what is essentially a room, it's a little expensive. At least it is for me. So in this case, and it also helped that it was a holiday week, and we're just kind of like, you know what, we'll just kind of take off. That's fine. That's fine. So that's sort of the situation. And for our other game on Sunday, my Sunday game that I play in RDN, I believe was on call at their work. They had a little switcheroo. They switched up something because they needed to. They had some other things they needed to attend to on a weekend, so they weren't able. So they switched on call coverage with somebody else, and yeah, so we didn't play. So no D&D. So not really anything to talk about as far as like campaign reports or anything because we haven't played since the last time we streamed. So we have a few other things we got to talk about today. I wrote down a couple of little topics here for myself. I've got some content ideas that we're maybe transcribe. It's a hand list, and I'd like to move that over and make it more of a typed list so we can talk that, look at that, maybe see what resonates with people. If you have things or things you definitely want to see, call them out in the chat as we go through them. That'll be great. Or leave a comment afterwards if you're watching after we stream live. If there's a particular content topic that you like that you want covered, that's helpful for me because otherwise I'm just kind of uh, vomiting ideas out and just kind of picking whichever one chooses my fancy at the moment. So if you guys have any insight about things specifically you want to hear, or things that aren't on the list that you want added to the list, we can add that as well. Other things we want to talk about, I wanted to talk a little bit about my current campaign. I thought since we didn't play, it's a good time to do a little bit of a campaign retrospective at this point. We'll look at the first, what is it, dozen sessions we've run now? First dozen sessions, and we'll take a look at that. Kind of the situation that we're in right now, and some of the struggles that I'm having with this particular campaign, some of which are kind of new to me. So that's going to be interesting, and I think this is a change in. And I guess this true. This truly is the first long-term campaign I've tried to run in 5e 2024. So I've run some shorter stuff, and nothing like a long dedicated campaign. So we'll talk a little bit about those struggles and what I'm seeing, what has been sort of my experience, and I think this is a very different experience as somebody who has played in the hobby for a while, and their knowledge of the game and the hobby is beyond this little yolk of the egg that is sort of D&D 5e 2024. Talk about that and sort of why seeing some of the differences I see and some of the challenges that I think are very specific to players who only have played this edition of the game or have only come into it this edition of the game. And I do think that this is very reminiscent of that. I don't necessarily want to say the Mercer effect, but the type of people who have been brought into the hobby as opposed to necessarily what the hobby has grown out of. We'll talk a little bit about that and what we're going to do from there. I also, in the Steam Summer Sale, picked up Cyberpunk 2077. I know I'm very late to it, obviously, many, many years late to it, but that's just the way that I play games. I don't want to pay that much for a game not knowing if I'm going to like it or not. So I wait, and now that it's had a bunch of updates, and I did definitely still come across some glitches and bugs, but give me a little bit of my impressions about it and how I felt about it so far. And then we have a little down the bottom. We get maybe some micro topics based off of what we have in content ideas. Maybe some Q&A time. We'll see. We'll take some questions. Maybe we'll do something like that. Who knows? I might hop onto something like ChatGPT and be like, "Hey, give me some questions to answer." If we don't have any burning topics to look at, we'll look at some of that stuff and answer some of those things. So that's the plan. I guess we should transcribe the list first. Even though I think that might take a little bit of time, because I have quite a few entries in here. But I think that'll be the easiest thing, and then, of course, you guys have any questions, comments, just go ahead and throw them in, either in real time as we're doing this, or, again, as a comment on the VOD later, and do that. But, yeah, it'll be a lot of me typing. Actually, we'll do some me typing, and then we'll see how that goes, and if it's a little too quiet, then maybe we'll hop into one of the other topics. Maybe we'll split it up like that. Be a little bit easier. But the first thing I've got to do is open up a Word document and do this stuff. So, and it is, okay. I think I can do this here. So I already have, I'll be honest, I already have a document where I keep some of this stuff for these, but I don't think I have anything that's specific for this. Alright, I don't think I did talk about this, didn't I? 3-to-1 prep method? I'm pretty sure I talked about 3-to-1 prep method. So I need to cross this out. And let me do that. I'm sorry, I know you guys can't see what I'm looking at, so I'll fix that real quick. I just want to make sure that's done. Let's make ourselves a new tab. Can I move this tab up to the top? I sure can. Alright, and we're going to say that this is... one thing that I don't like about the new Google Docs tab system is that it uses a very light gray on when I'm using this dark background in Google Docs. So it's sort of a medium gray text on a light blue background, which is basically unreadable. So anytime I'm typing in a heading for one of these documents, I'm like, I don't know. Hopefully I spelled everything right. And it looks like I did. Okay. If we're going to do content ideas, this will be our title. We'll do that. We'll set that up as the title, and then like this thing is just a bullet point list, so we're just going to hop in and get right to it. But let's go ahead and jump over so you guys can look at what I'm looking at. I think that will work. And let me reset this. Here we go. And away we go. There we go. All right, so we're going to split this up. We're going to make this a little bit bigger so you guys can see it. Boop. There we go. So these are just, like I said, I've got a handful of list ideas. We're just going to kind of transcribe these. We'll talk about them a little bit as we kind of go through them, kind of why we want to, maybe why we want to talk about them. But there's quite a few, so I don't want to spend too much time on each individual one. But of course, if you guys want to talk about one, chirp it up. We'll talk about it. All right. So the first one here is I really need a little stand for these things, especially with that stupid mic in the way. That's all right. So the first one we have here is D&D helping markets, shops, and fairs. There we go. So we want to talk about this just a little bit. Yeah, just kind of talking about different shopping options. And one of the things that I like to do as a DM is I like to pull in some historical little tidbits, some like real world stuff that we know about, and pull that in. And one of those is talking about markets and shops and fairs. And about so when goods are available, who sells them, and things like that. So markets, traditionally you had to have a license to have a market in your setting, or your settlement, I should say. That's usually how that went. And like, there's a thing called like a market cross, and you would have that. Talking about things like artisans and shops, and who has those, and where they're available, and where you can find them, and how convenient they are, or inconvenient. The thing where you're going to go to like larger settlements to get things like shops. They're going to have things that are available all the time because of craftsmen and artisans. And then fairs, which are like one-off markets. That's more like what we would maybe even consider something. Like if we want to look at a market that's very similar to what today, at least in the U.S., we would consider something like a farmer's market, where it's, every once in a while it kind of shows up. It's usually not an open all the time thing unless you're in a very specific, larger settlement like a city or something like that, where there is a permanent market space. And fairs are the same thing as markets, but they're even rarer and usually drawing people from further away. And these are usually around religious holidays, things of that nature. Sometimes they're set out in the middle of nowhere, kind of if you think about sort of a May Day celebration or something like that, or something like contemporarily, something like a Renaissance festival or a Ren Fair, something like that, where you have a bunch of vendors that show up from a whole bunch of different places, but it only happens like once a year. Or if you have a few different fairs in your area, I think we have. In my current area, we have like 3 annual fairs, and they're pretty close to each other. We just had one not too long ago. Last month? Yeah, I think last month was the end of it. So, same sort of thing. So we'll talk a little bit more in depth about that and how maybe adding that to your game can be really important. In the current campaign I'm running right now, we do have a fair that's going to be upcoming. We have a big religious celebration that people are going out to celebrate what is essentially the vernal or spring equinox. And there's going to be a whole bunch of stuff there, but there's going to be a lot of fair and vendors and things of that nature that they're going to go to. And it's happening in less than a week in game, so hopefully they finish up the current dungeon they're in and get off to it. And what do we have next? We have a so small and the light so low I can't read my own. Downtime rules. Not downtime rules and why to include in your game. Yeah, downtime rules are really fun. Right now we haven't done any downtime in our current campaign. Well, the one I'm running. We just finished downtime in the one that I play, and we just had about, what, 3? We took almost a month of downtime? Something like that. We're waiting for a very important person, a shogun, to get to a place so we can meet with them. So that takes time. A shogun's retinue is basically like a king's traveling, so there's probably hundreds of people. Well, yeah, maybe 200 plus people who are traveling with him, which is the court, the minor nobles, all the support staff, all the hangers-on, all the courtesans, etc., etc., etc. They're kind of coming with the shogun. And so we've had some downtime to do some other stuff. So we did some crafting, some carousing, some personal side quests, which is really nice time if you have characters who have personal business they want to attend to. Downtime's a really nice time to give them an opportunity to kind of do side adventures during that time. So that is one of the things that maybe I'll look at once they finish their current run after the fair. There's probably going to be some stuff. They're going to finish up their dungeon. They're going to do the fair stuff. Then it might be, oh, you guys are back in the town. This is a good opportunity to do maybe some downtime. Maybe we'll have like a week or two of downtime where they can do a few different things. It should be really useful. And I put this together, but I don't think we actually talked about it. Craft archetypes. I have down here the 4 craft archetypes. There are multiple types of traps. But I think it's really helpful. I think the traps are things that often get maligned, especially in contemporary D&D. Something to talk about. Can we talk about them? It's like alarm. I'm trying to remember them off the top of my head. There is lockdown. There's alarm, lockdown. We'll just call it a kill trap, which will go before cave becomes before else. Kill, lockdown, and I have a different word for this, but I can't remember what it is off the top of my head. We're gonna say entrap. Or yeah, we'll go with detain. That was the word. Detain. So those are the 4 kind of trap archetypes. The 4 things that traps do, in general. Now, sometimes they can do multiple of those, but I do want to talk about those a little bit more in depth, and I think having that understanding will help you understand how to build traps a little bit better in your game, and stuff that's not just where it feels like every trap has to be a 10-foot pitfall or a poison dart trap. You have a bunch of other traps that do different things. There are traps that alarm, they let people know that intruders are here. Detain, these are the things that like, the pit trap's a detain trap. It really isn't. A 10-foot fall in real life won't kill most people unless you really land on it weird on your like head or neck or something. It shouldn't kill you. It might hurt you, but it's not going to kill you. So that's meant to detain you. It keeps you there, like a tiger pit. There are the classic, this trap's here to kill you. And that's the one where you really, I like to say you really ramp it up. Like it really should be like a lethal sort of force. It shouldn't be like, oh, it's a arrow trap that does like 1d6 of damage to you. It's like that. That's not gonna, unless you're a wizard, that's not gonna kill anybody. Especially a first level one. So if it's meant to kill somebody, it should do appropriate killing damage, or at least have the potential to do that. And then a lockdown trap is a trap that stops points of egress. So essentially, my classic example for a lockdown trap is if you've ever watched any sort of heist episode of a television show or a movie or something where they're like trying to steal something from a museum or an art gallery or something like that, and there's like the pressure sensitive thing on the case, and they lift the case, and the iron bars fall down around the doors, and the alarm goes off, and they're like, oh no, now we're stuck in here. That's a lockdown trap. It keeps whatever the valuable thing that they're trying to protect from leaving, and it also does technically detain the people in there usually, but most importantly, it keeps whatever the item is or person or whatever it is from leaving, which is what you're trying to do. You're trying to keep things from leaving. It's also almost always mixed with an alarm trap, though not always. So detain and lockdown have a little overflow as to alarm. There's a lot of overflow in these. So it's not unreasonable for a trap to have more than one purpose in it, but it usually has like a primary purpose and then like a secondary purpose. So for something like the classic stealing the crown jewels thing, the lockdown thing is the most important thing, then the alarm's called. And I think that makes sense when you look at any sort of fictional narrative of that, where you're like, oh, but then you have time before the guards get there or the police or show up or whatever it is. That's that one. The combat encounter design triangle. And this is party, enemy, environment. And this is something that I've come to. This actually deals a little bit with what happened last time, in the last session of our campaign, because this is the way that I design encounters, and this is a problem that I'm having with the 2024 changes to encounter building. Is that now encounters that should be just moderate are now way too hard for my players. They're way more difficult than I'm meaning them to be. So I need to bring that back. I talked a little bit last time about, so we had a Dark Mantle encounter. So 4 first level PCs, 3 Dark Mantles. By the 2024 rules for encounter building, that is a across the board moderate, just a run of the mill combat. And not a combat that should pretty much wipe the whole party, which is what happened. And now, of course, there were things. I did roll a crit in there on somebody right off the bat, so they were pretty much immediately out of the combat, which is unfortunate, but that's just the way that I played. We roll the dice, and if we trust the dice, then we let the dice tell their story, and however you want to phrase that. But I try not to do a lot of fudging. I like to use the dice as much as possible. And when I fudge, I try not to fudge dice rolls. I try to fudge things like, oh, I'm going to give this guy like a little bit of extra HP, or maybe I'm going to reduce his AC a couple points just to make sure that people hit, because people are struggling to hit him, or stuff like that. Usually it's not like, oh, and then he totally rolled a miss, or stuff like that. I try not to do that. But there's an environment aspect in that, like having the magical darkness, which I don't think is considered when they're looking at when they change things like the CR encounter building, having a special thing that immediately puts most player characters at disadvantage in a combat, as well as having a way that's going to an environment that's going to slow them or make it difficult for them to move around the room, the combat theater, if you will. So, yeah, this would be what that was talking about, because I am running up against that, and I really need to figure out a way. I've pretty much learned at this point that I have to make easy encounters for the new 2024. The thing was is that Kobold Plus didn't I don't remember getting any sort of notification or anything that told me that it was going to change the 2024 encounter building rules. But it has done that so far, and that's usually what it used to balance encounters. But it has done that now. So it is something to keep out with. Because I've said this before, I don't usually have any problems making difficult combats. If anything, I have the exact opposite. I hear a lot of things about people, especially in 5e 2024, talking about like, oh, I can't make difficult encounters for my players. Like they always run roughshod over my encounters. I'm like, I have pretty much the exact opposite problem. And then have nearly almost always, as a DM, had the opposite problem, is that I will just make really, really difficult combats, even though the combat is, by the books, very straightforward, very moderate, right? Just middle of the road difficulty. But I have monsters that use their abilities. I was going to say correctly. That's not true. Advantageously, that they act as though they know what they're doing, just like the book says, right? The monsters know what they're doing. Same thing. I I just don't need that. I haven't needed to read that book because that's already how I run monsters most of the time. And dark animals are predator ambush monsters, so they ambush people. And so when they do that, they can do a lot of damage really quickly. And that's what happened. And then just some bad rolls and some other stuff, and uh, some players not being super wise about how they use their light, which made things much easier for my guys and much more difficult on them. Okay, injecting the Z axis into combat. This is talking about, hey, using verticality in your combats. Something that doesn't get used often. We did have an experience with our friends in one of our groups. Really, like the first time, I think they'd run maybe one shot before, maybe a couple one shots, and they're like, "Oh, I want to run this one," and then immediately as the last combat in there, threw in as an inexperienced team, threw in a magic carpet into it that the bad guys were on, and very quickly, more experienced player shenanigans happened. Players were like, "Oh, I'm gonna take that carpet and I'm gonna use it to my advantage because now it's off the ground and nobody can get to me at melee." By finding a way to get up onto the carpet and essentially kicking. I think it was like a couple magic users off of it. Which, if you get somebody up there who's a martial class, they can literally just push them off the carpet because they're not gonna make. And in a contested strength roll to like get get in a shoving contest with like a fighter or a barbarian, they're gonna lose, and they did. And it was a fun combat, but very silly. And you could see the new dungeon master being like, okay, but they're like up here, all right, and you're gonna cast a spell, but you're only gonna cast it up here, so it's only gonna hit up here, and it's not gonna hit you guys who are standing under the carpet. Like, yeah. So talking about how to inject stuff into that, but that is more of what I'd say. You need to get what is the equivalent of your dungeon master sea legs first before you start throwing in stuff like Z axis. But talking about how to use it effectively, so that's one of the topics that I want to talk about because I love using the Z axis. It's a super great way. I have a combat that always comes to mind when I think about the Z axis, which was watching. It was a fight with just a handful of goblins and a big ogre. Wasn't going to be a difficult fight. Players focused on the ogre, who was on the ground level, and then the goblins were up on some rooftops, and they didn't pay attention to the goblins. The goblins almost ended up murdering them just with arrows. Just every round they were able to shoot, and they were able to hit. They had the high ground. There's no way for the characters to hide or get away from them. They were just standing in the open, wailing on the ogre, who was just a big hit point sink, a big brute monster. It's like super easy to hit. It has like an AC of like 12. It has a ton of hit points. You can take a lot of damage. And so doing what it's supposed to do, which is being a damage sponge while the goblins just pot shot at him, and that was nearly a wipe. Uh, so you'll start to see some consistency in that. Like I do play combat with an idea that like you gotta be a little smart about it. Unless you're really coming up on people who are not prepared for you. If they're prepared for a fight, you need to be prepared for a fight too, or you can also run. Just run. That's okay. You can run. If you're in a disadvantageous position, there's no harm in discretion is the better part of valor, and just run the heck away. It's okay. And I do tell my players up front, it's like, hey, if you guys try to run away from combat, I'm not gonna chase you down and just TPK you just to TPK you. Like you can get away from the fight. I'm gonna let you get away from the fight if you guys make the decision to run, which I think is really important. Da, da, da. I'm trying to read my own handwriting, and it's too low of light. And we talked about this a little bit before, but I do want to touch on it again. This is how I balance the counters. in an adventure. So not the individual encounter balancing, but how I balance the greater tableau of encounters within an adventure. And we're going to just put in here because I know I've talked about it a little bit before, because we talked about it just with the old things you should put in your adventure in your dungeon, which is the old cupcakes and sledgehammers argument. So you want nice easy combats and nice difficult combats. Like I said, the Dark Mantle combat was a middle of the road encounter, but they also bypassed an encounter in that session too. Afterwards, there's a way they could have gotten into a fight with what is essentially, I think, animated armors. I think this is the block I'm using. Maybe not. Maybe it's clay columns. They're a different type of column. Anyways, the constructs, and they could have gotten in a fight with them, but they were able to sort of talk their way around it, which was really interesting to talk their way around a construct that is nonverbal. They can't talk back. But we're able to sort of get around it. It was a cool scene for letting the cleric shine. The cleric, they're in what is clearly some sort of old religious area, and was able to sort of show, like, hey, I'm supposed to be here, and they didn't attack, which was really cool. They were able to get a little bit of information out of them, not a lot, because obviously the constructs can't talk. And so, oh yeah, this is a good one. I think this is going to be a useful one just for me. How to stealth like MGS. Right, I'll just spell it out. Metal Gear Solid. There's a great Mark Brown video, and this is something that could be really useful for the. Actually, you know what? This is gonna be its own subtopic. I'm gonna put it in here. So I'm just putting it. So Mark Brown is a video essayist, but primarily they focus on video games and sort of the systems and how they're built and things like that. And I have a number of different content creators that I watch that are focused on video game creation and sort of behind the scenes as video game development, the systems that they use, why choices are made in certain systems, and why games are set up the way they are for the players to interact with. And Mark Brown's one of them, and he has a fantastic video about Metal Gear Solid's stealth system, about the exclamation marks and the looking at things before the alarm, and the sort of stepped alarm state, and how you can use it. And I think this is something that would make my D&D games better, and I think could make your D&D games better. So I need to sit down and rewatch the video because it's been a while since I've watched it, and really kind of dig it in and make some notes for myself. And I really want to do that and make that into a video topic and see how we can turn that into better D&D fuel, and maybe make it its own little. I don't necessarily want it to be a hard-coded like D&D system, like encumbrance or something like that, but more of a like, this is an idea of how to do stealth, which is more than, oh, you failed your stealth roll and now you're in a fight, kind of thing. So I do want to do that. And then just as a little under that, video game design for better D&D games. So like I said, I follow a number of different content creators that do video game design. Not that I'm not particularly interested in video game design. I have no aspirations to design my own video game. I got that out of my system when I was a teenager, and realized that that's probably not for me. But doing that, I think that the broader your inputs are, the more touch points you have in different industries and different types of things that you can draw and bring into your D&D games, the better off your D&D games are going to be. The more holistic knowledge you're going to have about game design, which I think is really helpful as a dungeon master, is not something traditionally D&D does a very good job of teaching you how the system works, or the how and why of the system. They tell you what the system is and to use it and how to use it, but not why that. So you might wonder things like, hey, why are things like passive perception start off at a base 8, whereas AC starts off at a base 10? What's up with that? And those sorts of ideas, especially when you consider historically, skills would also start off passive skills would start off at a base 10. So why was it lowered to 8 in 5th edition? Start to dig into that, because that's not something D&D tells you. Wizards of the Coast doesn't tell you that. Might be helpful for a DM to know that, especially if considering that D&D is something that I think we all know is very much a homebrew source. We give you a rule set, and then you can build off of it and change things to make the game that you want to make. So then not giving you the reasoning for why the developers did something for the game makes that a lot harder. You have to work a lot harder to get that mastery of the system. Which I do think is the sort of stuff that could be included in, I don't know, something like a Dungeon Master's Guide. That might be an important thing, but that's another discussion. Let's move on. Again, if you guys like what you see, or you like one of these specific content types, and you want to see more about them, or you want me to talk about that sooner rather than later, I've got a bunch of stuff. I'm just kind of throwing spaghetti against the wall. So if you like something, chirp it up, leave a chat, leave a comment, etc. Or if you have ideas that I don't have here that are things that you struggle with or you want insight on, or topics you'd like to see covered, add those in, and I can add them to the list. They'll go in the list. All right, we how to stealth. Balance narrative versus play, prescriptive versus emergent story. Is this? Oh no, that's for the next thing. All right. Let's say that balancing, and this is something I'm struggling with right now. Narrative and play, and this is basically prescriptive versus emergent. Sorry. So I'm very much in the latter half of this. I'm very much I don't like to come in and tell you, oh, this is the plot, and this very much just kind of falls into, in the end, this is very much a plot versus DC or versus character. Okay. And we'll say PC. I like to capitalize, even though that's not technically how you do that with English, but eh. So yeah, balancing narrative and play, prescriptive versus emergent story, plot versus PC-driven game. Gameplay? I guess I should say gameplay. No. You know what? I'm just gonna take out the. I'm just gonna say plotted. We'll say DM plotted. Versus emergent story. That gets the same point across. The idea of like balancing narrative and play. How much should the DM plot out things? How much should we let whatever happens at the table and whatever the PCs decide that, or the players decide that they want to chase down, be the pushing thing for the bit? What is your balance? And I'm not sure there's a right answer. I think every group's different. I do feel like in the campaign that I'm running, I really wanted it to be more balanced on that emergent side, like very heavy, because that's just my style is sort of a dungeon master or game master. So I'm going to set up situations, and then you guys decide whatever you guys latch onto, we'll explore more of. And that comes from just having kind of a larger world that's kind of my main setting for games. Be like, the world is your oyster. Where do you want to go? What do you want to do? We can explore a whole bunch of different stuff. And I think that a lot of people who come into the hobby later are very much in the very first camp, and that's the thing that I've really struggled with in this campaign. Is that a lot of my players just don't really have a strong idea or a strong drive to chase down what the things that are important to their characters. And there's a lot of sitting back and kind of expecting the plot to kind of happen to them, which is not necessarily how I like to run games. And that's kind of been the struggle that I've had with this campaign so far. So I'm trying to retool something that I started, and I told them, and everybody was on board with, that we were doing very much the emergent character focus. You guys should have. We did a big long session 0 about, okay, here's the stuff about your backstory, here's stuff about your family and your characters and your friends, and the things that you want that your character is dealing with, the things they are chasing after or they're running away from, and then now that we're a dozen sessions in and the players just haven't done a ton, some players more than others, haven't done a ton of being like, I am going to chase down the thing that's important to my character, and I would like you guys to help me with that. There hasn't been a lot of that, which can it's kind of reached a frustrating point. And so now I'm in a position where I'm trying to go from that emergent story thing, and I'm trying to drag it back across the line and be like, okay, I have to just kind of fire hose things at you guys. I have to come up with that, which is not generally my style. So I'm a little out of water here. That is something I do more with like a one shot or something because that's just the nature of it. So I need to treat, I guess, my campaign a little bit more like I would a very standard, straightforward adventure. It's just not really my style. So I'm having growing pains. Let's put it that way. I'm trying stuff that I'm not great at, and or that I don't have a ton of experience with, and I'm gonna have some growing pains with that. And I think it's frustrating for me, and I think it's been some frustration for the well, I know it's been frustrating for the players as well. But we're gonna get there, I think. And I gotta figure out where that sweet spot is and try to figure out which is hard. It makes me want to restart the campaign because we started the campaign off. Uh, it's like having the blueprints for the wrong type of building you're trying to build and be like, oh, I need to build a different building with these same blueprints that I already have and the same materials I already bought. This is going to be weird and cobbled together and different. And so that is sort of the situation that we're in. So we're going to get there, I feel like, but it is going to take me a little bit longer. And it makes me wish I'd been like, there's part of me that's like, should I just cut this campaign and be like, we're going to restart the campaign so we can focus specifically on this rather than this sort of more amorphous start that we did because I was expecting you guys to sort of take the reins of the campaign and run with them, and that hasn't happened. All right, but that's neither here or there. We can talk a little bit more about that, about the campaign stuff. All right, oh, how I outline a D&D campaign. That's where we are. D&D campaign. And then here we're going to have some stuff. I outlined a D&D campaign where I just lost my place. Where was I? Plot. Backstory. Side quest. And trying to read my own handwriting. I think that says emergent. This feels like emergent exploration. I'm gonna put exploration here. No, okay. Yeah, I can do emergent exploration. I think I understand what I meant by that. By that, I think I meant, oh, you're going to discover the world as you travel through it, rather than try to force feed you. Like I said, I've been working on this world for a while now, so I have a bunch of information I could just like fire hose at my players and be like, you need to read this 50-page dossier to get yourself familiar with the setting, or it could be like, you guys will discover it as you go through it. And then I can always just be like, these are things that your characters would be at least passingly familiar with. Like I've done that with giving them the list of gods, but we only have one cleric character, one divine character, and so he's gotten some more stuff. And then I told him very much as we were setting up the campaign, you tell me how you want to play a cleric because I've seen it work both ways. Either you want to go full in on the religious side and you'd be like, I am a member of the cloth. I am part of this organization that is very large institution in the world, and I have a place in it, and I want to know about the history of it, where it is, and the status of it by that, and like what are its goals, what is it trying to do, what is my place within that organization, and what is my relationship with the gods, versus be like I want to play a wizard that is just has a different spell list. I've seen it played both ways, where people are like, "Oh, that's just the source of the power," and it's not. You see that very common. I feel like with like warlock players, where some warlock players really want to lean into their patron and that relationship and understanding it. And other people are like, "I just want a different source. I just want to play a warlock because they have a cool spell list, and I want to do Eldritch Blast whole lot. Or it's like my first. I want to dip my pinky toe into what it's like to play a spellcasting class, because maybe I've only played martial characters before. So doing something like a warlock or maybe like a ranger, that are kind of half casters is maybe a little bit easier for them. But yeah, we'll talk about how I outline giving. The truth is that I'm not outlining too far in advance because, like I said, I do a lot more emergent story. So I kind of wait to see what you guys are picking up on, and then using that to inform decisions I make behind the screen and in my prep in between sessions. But I can talk more about it when we do that topic. All right. The morale system. And why I use morale system. I'll say this: why I use it, and you should too. Yeah. That was the thing about they didn't get a lot of morale checks in the session with the encounter with the dark males where they almost wiped. They didn't get a lot of morale checks started to happen very, very late, and that's just because they had disadvantage on attacks. They were spending time not attacking characters, or making sure that they had disadvantage when they made their attacks. So it's really unfortunate. Something that I think more tactical players would have been like, oh, I would have disadvantage with this attack or to do this thing because I'm in darkness. So what I'm going to do instead is use the help action to get rid of disadvantage for one of my friendos, so that way they can just make a straight roll, and then we'll be more successful probably. But then that also gets into the thing of, oh, isn't better, the old true strike argument, is it better to just attack with, well, that's a little bit different. There's a difference between attacking straight versus attacking with advantage. Attacking twice straight or once with advantage. It's kind of a different argument than attacking twice with disadvantage or once without disadvantage. I feel like. Yeah, it's less likely you're gonna. More likely you're gonna. Well, actually, it's less likely you're gonna crit with disadvantage, I guess. Yeah. I'm trying to do some math in my head. I think that's right. I think that math works out that way. But yeah, the morale system is something that I've implemented. If you watch my solo play stuff, you've seen me use the morale system. I think it's very, very useful. I think in general, monsters in D&D, contemporary D&D, have too many hit points. I think that's one of the things that is definitely one of the rallying cries from things that like the OSR community. Like, combat takes too long. You know what makes combat take a lot less time? When things die faster. So just removing a lot of hit points will do that, and then also ups the lethality of the game, which is also an issue that a lot of people have with contemporary D&D, because it's like, oh, it's just really hard to imperil play characters. Again, not technically an issue I usually have. Usually, I get to a point where I have to pull some punches on player characters because my monsters will beat the snot out of them. But that's just me being. Let's be honest, I'm a more tactical style player, more strategic tactical style player, and I feel like especially the group that I'm running for right now, they're not those kind of players. But that doesn't mean that I necessarily need to abandon what I find enjoyable about the game, especially the prep aspect, just to save them. But I also need to find a little bit of balance in there. Again, I thought it was going to be a moderated counter. I'm sorry. They changed the CR. It changed whether there were going to be 2 monsters versus 3 in the encounter. That's a big swing. That's 150% change. Let's see. The morale system. Tips for solo RPG success. Go back down to that. And I guess I could talk. Well, I already talked a little bit about my experience with Ironsworn. I did a little review on that. If you haven't seen that, go check it out. I did that a few weeks ago. Go check it out. Or at least at the time of recording this, it was a few weeks ago. So, tips for solo, I guess, yeah, not quite a month ago. Tips for solo play, right? Lots of fun. Solo RPG success. and how to avoid newbie solo problems. Yeah, I think it can be really hard to get into playing a TTRPG by yourself as a solo game, uh, especially if you've only played, especially if you've only been a player. I think if you've been a dungeon master, it's a little bit easier. But what I do like about solo RPGs, and I think you can put this in here. I need this subtopic because I've talked around this topic, but I don't think I've done a dedicated thing on this topic. Is that using solo slash list games as a stepping stone, or let's say a funnel for how do I say this? Not necessarily as a funnel yeah, I was gonna say breeding ground. Let's not use that language. That's weird. Let's not use that language. Uh, funnel. Funnel is a very specific word, and it does work in this sense, but it's not necessarily what I'm looking for. As a let's say stepping stone to creating more DMs. Yeah, this is worth 2 lines. And I'm just going to put it here because that'll remind me to make the clickbait title for it. The solution to the DM problem. So, as we all know, as I'm sure we've all heard many times, that Dungeons and Dragons, and specifically, but all RPGs, but specifically Dungeons and Dragons, has a dungeon master problem. We cannot get enough dungeon masters, which is not false. I don't think it's quite the issue I think that most people think it is. Not that, both in its severity and in its sort of reasoning as to why the situation is here. I don't think that there's a lack of people who want to be dungeon masters. Every time you talk, or at least every time that I talk to somebody about doing dungeon masters, you usually get the response like, "Oh, I could never do that. Like, that's not something I can handle. Like, I could never do that." Which tells me that there's sort of an education problem or a training problem, or like there's a knowledge gap somewhere in there. That's generally how that role shows up to me. And so we talked a little bit more about that, and it was like, but one of the things that I will tell you as somebody who played and talking to one of my friends who was interested in maybe doing some dungeon mastering, but was always kind of like, oh, I couldn't do that, or, I'm not prepared, or, I wouldn't know how to do it, or I feel like I would be a failure at it. Then we did some, like, what I call GM-less games, where we're basically doing a solo game with more than one person, and we're kind of taking turns playing NPCs, and also we use some dice to decide some things, so there's kind of the emergent narrative kind of aspect of it. And doing that, and that immediately was like, oh, actually, this is not too hard. If I was just doing this instead of playing a character, I could do that. Like, I could do this. This isn't that difficult. So usually it's like getting over that first hurdle, right? Just giving them the taste of it. And I think that goes a long way. If we did that, if we did a lot more, if D&D did a lot more support for things like that, or had a Dungeon Master's Guide that was worth a crap, it actually told you how to run the game, uh, we'd have a lot more success with that, about transitioning people into DM roles. Let's see. Yeah, that's an important one that I haven't talked about. Find your DM/GM superpower. And how to use it. Should we capitalize it? No. Yes. Yes. So, I think that everybody, we look at people like Abria, Eingard, Brindley Mulligan, Matt Mercer, uh, sundry other, we'll say celebrity DMs, Chris Perkins, etc. And you go, I can't be as good a DM as them. But each of them is not the same type of dungeon master or game master. They all have different strengths. Their games all feel very different. You see that? Like, you look at somebody like Brinley Mulligan, and you're like, oh, an amazing improviser. And I think if you want an example of that, watch Never Stop Blowing Up. I was like, I'm not sure he did any prep for Never Stop Blowing Up. He just basically yes and that entire insane off the rails train ride that is that game. And it is very fun, very cool, very wild though. And then you look at somebody like Matt Mercer who's spending, entire weeks basically prepping for a game for each next session, spending so many hours doing it in the train and different variations and oh, what if the players decide to do this instead of that, and all these sort of contingencies that he's planning for. Very, very different. And then you have somebody who, like Abria Angar, who really focuses in on sort of the emotional and personal relationships and very much the sort of, I was going to say soft skills. It's not really soft skills, but the softness, really the softness of the role play, the emotional portion of the role play, way more than any of the rest of them do. And so finding what you do, what your sort of superpower as DM and GM, and leaning into that aspect to make that a better game, and then trying to find players who are looking for something like that. And I think that's one of the struggles that I'm having with my current campaign, is that obviously I make a more of a tactical combat kind of thing, and I have players who are not very tactically sound. And I'm really struggling with that because that's sort of what I probably consider one of my stronger suits as an master game master, and doing some world building and having stuff and being able to setting up a sandbox in which you can play in, and the decisions you make, the choices you make will have impacts both on the greater setting as well as the karma that comes back to you as a player character. And I just don't think that my players are quite rocking that. So then I go, oh, well, you have the wrong group then. Okay, sure, maybe that's the answer. But these are also my friends, and I also play in a game with them in which I have fun. I just happen to be running this game. So is the answer to that like I don't run games for these friends, this group of players? That's not. It sucks to be like, oh, sorry, I just won't DM for these people. That's not it. Now maybe I'm like, oh well, maybe I don't run a campaign, or I made the mistake of trying to. It's hard to say it's even a mistake. I tried to run the campaign I wanted to run in the way that I want to run it, with players who I feel like have shown again and again that they're not very interested in playing in that kind of campaign, and they're not interested in growing into that for the most part. So that means one of the two things got to change, right? Either they change their playstyles, which is pretty unlikely, or I have to change my DM style a little bit, which is difficult, but not impossible. It just means that I can't focus on things that I'm really good at, that superpower stuff. I'm going to have to focus in on some of the stuff that I'm not as great at, and some of my weaknesses, and things that I don't necessarily like to do. Now, does that build resentment, and maybe it puts it to a point where I don't want to run the campaign anymore? Maybe. We'll see. But we got to find some middle ground in the middle. And that's what we're going to focus on doing. Alright, but yeah, find your superpower and lean into it. There we go, some top DM resources. Aren't. Here we go. Yep. That aren't D&D Beyond. So, if you're new to the channel or you haven't watched me before, or even maybe if you have, and because I don't always bring it up, I don't have a D&D Beyond subscription. I don't like the platform. I don't like the way that business is done. I don't think it's reasonable that I can buy something and then I still have to license the thing. And then when the system goes down, because I got burned on this with 4th edition, with their online character builder, you just lose all that stuff because you don't own any of it. And I think that's an unreasonable and bad business model for a game that I should be able to play forever, that I shouldn't lose that thing. And so if it's not available where I can download the software and keep it for myself, or is a book that I won't always have access to, I'm essentially buying a thing, I'm buying a license for a thing that I still have to pay a monthly subscription for. And I'm like, it should be one way or the other. It should be either I buy the books individually, and the use of D&D Beyond itself, full feature except for the content, is free to use, which is fine. Right? I can't make unlimited characters on D&D Beyond, which would be what I would expect to do for free. I mean, within a limit. But I think, what is the limit now? 3, 5? Something like that. Come on. That's not enough characters. We know that. We know that's not enough characters. Or I don't have to buy the books and everything should just be fully loaded in the monthly subscription, which I think is a reasonable thing. Instead of whatever it is, upcharge the monthly subscription by a few dollars a month for people, using U.S. terms because I'm a U.S. person. Upping it, maybe even to an extra $5 a month, but you've got access to every published thing and potentially third-party stuff they started putting in there. That's a deal, buddy. That's a deal. People will be all over that. I would even consider maybe signing up for it, at least to build my characters. But to burn the candle from both ends like that, it pushes me off. So I do have some things that I use instead of D&D Beyond, and for people who aren't interested in supporting those business practices, or maybe you just don't like D&D Beyond, or whatever it is, what I do find is that people who only use D&D Beyond have a very limited understanding of the game. That has been my experience. The people who have only played the game with D&D Beyond don't really understand the game. We had this come up in just the last session. I keep coming back to this encounter just because it was it shined such a very specific light on such a number of issues, both within our current campaign and D&D as total, and it's just kind of a little microcosm. But the idea is that my player and the player who's looking up interpretations of Dark Vision rather than just reading the Dark Vision rules, which are relatively clear, but also like the sources you were looking at were clearly not, I think, the right sources. It's like these are people arguing on the internet about what is and is not included in Dark Vision. It's like, that's fine, but this is the ruling, so that's my understanding of the rules, and that's how it's going to be. Oh, yeah. Home brewing. We're going to say from scratch. So we're going to say, we're talking about remixing and reskinning. Yeah, you can waste a lot of time as a dungeon master homebrewing stuff from scratch, when really it's just a lot easier to remix and reskin stuff. And this is one of the things that I think is the failure of educating things like Dungeon Master to be like, hey, you can just like take other monsters and change some stuff around and use that, instead of having to make new characters from ground zero, new like monsters and stuff from ground zero, and especially when the toolkit they give you to build the monsters is not good, and also just doesn't fit within their own CR. Monsters that they use, it clearly was not used when they made the monsters either, because they have monsters that definitely don't follow those rules. Doing stuff like that. That's a very simple one. That will not take a lot of time to talk about. I think a lot of people have gotten to that point already, but it's nice to just put it out there, just for, you never know when a new dungeon master is going to stumble across something and be like, I'm really struggling with this when I feel like I gotta make monsters. Like, my players have memorized all the monsters in the monster manual, so I need to make up new monsters. How do I do that? I was going to bring up that Dark Mantle encounter again, but I don't want to focus on it. But what I will say is one of the things I do try to do as a dungeon master is try to not just say, "Oh, this is a goblin." I'm like, yeah, it's going to be clear it's a goblin, but I'm just going to describe it. I'm not going to say, and then you get attacked by goblins. It's like, no, you have these small greenish monsters that are about the size of halflings. They have some long, pointed ears, snaggle teeth, and glowing red eyes. If you're using, I think Pathfinder ones have glowing red eyes, right? Can't remember. Uh, they're chittering and stuff like that, but cowardly at the same time. And everybody will go like, "Oh, goblins, yeah, that's a goblin." But if it's a monster that's not super iconic, like a type of humanoid, or has humanoid proportions, that'll be a lot easier to kind of pull off. All right, well, this is taking a lot longer than I thought. There's so much more of these. We're just gonna do some of these, I guess, and then we're gonna hop in because I do want to split it up and talk about a few other things. Like I said, I don't want the title of this to be completely wrong. But we are getting long in the tooth, and I have not finished the first page of this because I keep talking about it. That's the problem. But that's assumably that's why you watch content, right? Is to watch the person talk about the things. But these are again just ideas for content that I have that I want to talk about that I haven't had a chance to yet. Let's say, always, yeah, this will be it. This is one that I think is a little bit more contentious with people. Always passive perception, active investigation. This actually dovetails very nicely with something that I want to talk about, which is not Justin Alexander. I swear, every time that's Justin Alexander from the Alexandrian. I swear, every time that I want to say his name, I almost always say Jason Alexander. It's the guy from Seinfeld. Different person completely. It's the actor from Seinfeld, and it's not the guy from the Alexandrian. You know, because I've been reading his book. I don't think it's in here. No, I've got it in the other room where I've been reading it. I've been reading his. So you want to be a game master? Is that what's it called? His book. Anyways, it came out this year, last year, in the last year, in the last year, late last year, and picked it up. Been reading through it slowly, and I'm into the part where they're talking about heist, heist and raids, which are very similar types of adventures. And his let it ride mechanic, and I was like, oh, that's interesting. I'm not sure I agree with it. And this kind of falls into the always passive perception, always active investigation thing that I want to talk about a little bit more of. Uh, primarily, primarily in the let it ride mechanic, he's talking about heists and raids where you make a character rolls their stealth once, and then you kind of use that stealth going on, and then only forcing them to re-roll it in very specific circumstances, or essentially only re-rolling it when they might fail. I can't remember. I gotta go back and look at it a little bit. It's been a couple of weeks since I've read that. And you go back and look at that passage. But I was like, oh, this is interesting. I have some thoughts about it that I want to talk about. And it's very similar to my idea about maybe always passive perception, because I like the idea that perception is just you noticing things. So me noticing things is not something necessarily that I'm actively doing. If I'm actively looking for something, that's maybe investigation. This is where having perception and investigation in the same rule system as a cross point always gets, I feel like, gets really confusing for everybody involved because there's not always a super clear delineation about what is perception and what is investigation. But if past perception was just, oh, that's always just something you might notice, like you're just in tune with your environment, so you're like, that seems out of place, that's weird. Versus being like, where is the secret door? There's got to be a switch for the secret door around here. And I think those are two different things. And in my mind, that's what makes sense for a passive perception versus an active investigation check. If you're, if we're gonna drop it back OSR style and be like, oh, elves just have a chance of seeing hidden doors and passageways. That sounds like passive perception to me. You walk past something and go, that's weird. What's that? What's what is that? And then you do an active investigation. Like you've noticed it, but you maybe don't know what it is, or maybe you do know what it is, but you're like, I don't know how to open it. And maybe that's the active investigation check. Maybe you discover it's not open from the side. It's a one-way thing. And then dealing with the let it ride mechanics, which I'm not sure I love. I like the intent. With a lot of Justin Alexander stuff, there's a lot of stuff that I'm like, I like this. It's not how I'd implement it, but I do like a lot of the stuff that he writes about. So it's one of those things where I get about 70% of agreement, and then I get the last 30%. It's like, yes, but I do it slightly differently, kind of thing. And I think that that's a good spot to be in. That's how I know that it's high quality content. That I know that this is a good source it's coming from. That he has really strong, well thought out ideas. When I go, most everything he writes, I'm like, yeah, that makes sense. I'm not sure I'd do it quite like that, but yeah, I agree. So if you haven't read the book, go out and grab it. It's really good. The first almost half of it is about running dungeons, making and running dungeons. So if you're playing bog standard D&D, it's a great book. If you're running stuff that's not D&D, you'll get more use out of the back half of the book, which does things like raids and heists and mysteries and other stuff. Other different types of adventures that are not dungeon crawls. Let's see. Next up. Oh, yeah. DM screen. Yes or no? We'll just put use a DM screen. Use a DM screen? Yes or no? I'll be honest, I don't use a DM screen most of the time. I don't like it. One of the things that I don't like about it, number one, I have my DM binder, which is sitting in my bag over there, so I'm not going to go grab it. But I do have a folder that's got all my quick reference stuff in it, so I don't need it for the quick reference stuff. I also don't hold miniatures on the table in front of me like that, so I don't need it to hide my miniatures. I'll keep those in my bag as well if I need to. So the only thing the Dungeon Master screen does is hide rolls, which I already said I try not to fudge rolls really at all. And usually I've got a dice rolling thing, and I'm sitting usually far enough away from the players that unless you have a real nosy player who's going to look at your dice rolls, usually not an issue. Also, I dislike the screen because I feel like it puts up a barrier in between me and the players, and I want it to be a little bit more freeform, a little bit collaborative, a little less like, oh, that's your stuff, and this is my stuff, and this is where I hide all the stuff that you don't get to see. Is like, if you want to read my notes, and I have had players do that before who aren't interested in reading the notes, that they'll peek over and take a look at it. You're only spoiling your own fun. So if that's a sort of game that you want to be spoiled in, I mean, I guess that's up to you. But if it starts to impinge on my fun, you know what I'm going to do? Instead of putting up a DM screen, I'm probably going to stop running for you. Or I'm going to tell you to sit somewhere else. One of the two. Usually, it's been my experience that other players at the table will usually take care of that. They'll be like, stop looking at the notes. What are you doing? So usually I don't have to do anything like that. But otherwise, I'd be like, okay, you can't sit here. You can't sit next to me because I can't trust you to not look at my notes. And if that doesn't work, then I'm just going to stop running for you. Which I think is a good way to suss out maybe people you do or do not want to play with. Is give them the opportunity to show them they reveal themselves that they're not people that you want to play with, rather than trying to hide it from them. Have you off the blank page? This is gonna be adventure design. Uh, yeah, I don't really want to put something there. Yeah, I'll just put adventures because I got a few things I want to list here. Where am I at? No. Didn't even something to keep my place. We're gonna do tables, templates. Oh man. I can tell just by not looking at it that I'm not typing correctly. Tables, templates, idea kernels, and inspirations, which we're going to go on to the second level anyways. So it doesn't really matter. So tables, templates, idea kernels, things that I use to like, hey, I need to make an adventure. What am I going to do? I think that's a stopping point for a lot of dungeon masters, a lot of game masters, is when you're like, oh, I got to make an adventure. Mm. And that's kind of where things stop. You're like, I don't know what to do next. So I want to share a little bit about like how I try to get away from that problem, because I think the blank page is the hardest part is getting started. Once you get something started, then things start to once the mechanism of your mind starts to move, it tends to stay in motion. You have generally good ideas, and you don't generally, especially if you're making an adventure, you're usually not going to have some sort of whatever the DM equivalent of writer's block is, where you're just like, I don't know what else to put in here. And so some sources I do like that. Uh, and I think templates, tables, idea kernels, and inspiration sources are very useful for that. Having places that you can go to be like, nothing's coming to mind. Where can I go to get some fresh ideas? That'll be very useful, and making sure that they're varied so you're not doing the same sort of adventure over and over and over and over and over again. Yeah. So exists to be a better player. We'll say D&D player. Though this could be useful for any TTRPG. So I think this should be tough. To being? Being. Yeah, X tips to being. So obviously X is a variable, it seems, and because I don't know how many there will be, I need to sit down and think about it. But I think there are some very strong player tips you can give to people. Be like, hey, this is how to maybe be a more productive player. Maybe I should do that better. Thanks. More productive? Question mark. I'll probably go with better, but I really mean more productive player. Which is basically helping the game run smoothly, as well as making it more enjoyable and entertaining for yourself and everybody else at the table, which I think should be the aim of most players and literally everybody sitting at the table, both DMs and players. Hopefully you agree with that. If you don't agree with that, you might not be on the right channel, my man. You might need to go check some other content creators. Maybe the sort of content creators who are like, oh, it's the DM's job to provide everything to the players. I'm not in that camp. I think the players hold a lot of responsibility as to the success or failure of a individual D&D session all the way up to an entire campaign. Not all of that onus can be on the dungeon master or game master. Let's say becoming. Right? Let's get an extra letter in. There we go. Becoming a better dungeon master. Alright, did that one. Did I do a rolling weird dice? I'm pretty sure I did rolling weird dice, but 1d40, 60, 80, 20, 30. Rolling weird dice. This is something that's just so intuitive. I think once you get used to playing in the hobby, but there's very rarely any sources that actually just tell you how to roll something weird like that. Like if you have a, we can even put 66 up here. Even though a D66 table is pretty common now. How do you roll? Even the weird thing is the D66 actually doesn't have 66 choices. It's actually 36 choices, right? Yeah, which is actually 36 choices. Which is very different than what is it? What is it that Mythic Bashing Land has? 72? A D72 roll? I think. That's a weird roll. Which is 12 times 6, because you roll a D6 and a D12 together. But yeah, very interesting. And I think I've talked about that before, but that's not really something that's worth its own full dedicated video, probably, because it's a really short thing once you know how to do it. But it is a thing that, like, unless somebody shows you or you just eventually figure it out, you won't know how to do. And being able to make things so you don't always have to do like a D20 table or a D100 table is helpful. Maybe even put 15 here. That there are ways to get there, but you have to understand, you just gotta understand some dice a little bit, and then that will work out for you. Ooh, yeah, yeah. So I did want to do something. I'm gonna put it in here because that's who I was watching about it. Lots of people have videos about this topic, but this is the one that it's been a while. Score Gothy. What did I say? No, I think that's right. Skorkowski's Quantum Ogres video. So there was something that he wrote something about the Quantum Ogres video, and I can't remember what it was, but it's been a while since that came out. But I definitely wanted to talk a little bit about what's going on there. And I mean, I'll put it here, even though I know it is. But there's something he must have said something very specific that I felt like I had a different take on. I wanted to talk about. I probably won't even reference it. I might reference the video that I watched the video, but it's not going to be like a reaction video or something like that. These are always kind of fun. I don't do these very often. Make a PC. Flash Sidekick. Those are always fun. Tips to help you finish the campaign. And then we are almost to that point, and then I will probably take a quick break. And then we'll come back and we'll talk about, I think we'll talk about Cyberpunk next for a little bit. Probably not going to be a very long section. I just kind of want to talk about my first impressions of it. First impressions, I've played like 25 hours of it now. But not very much the main story, I'll say that. Just so we can take a break from this, because like I said, we have gotten maybe 50% of the way through. So, not great. It's definitely slower than I thought it would be. Always goes that way. Always feel like, both in my D&D prep and in my stream prep, I'm like, things will always seem to take longer than I think they will. I figured I'd rocket through this pretty quickly, but c'est la vie. That is the way. Tips to help you finish a campaign. So yeah, I mean that's things like one of the things that I try to do when I make campaigns, try to figure out level-wise where I want to end it, and that answer is generally not 20. I generally run low-level campaigns anyways, just because that is the D&D that I find fun. I think once you get into, certainly by the time you're ending, I'd say even probably before you end the second tier of play, which is at level 16, that D&D especially is already kind of off the rails. We know that there's one of the things that the developers or former developers at WotC were very clear about is that, hey, we didn't playtest high tier play nearly as much. Like most of the gameplay has been QA'd at the very low levels. So those levels, like, especially we know that the sweet spot for most players is like 3 to 7. Like that's the area that gets played the most, and the people that like to play the areas the most, that's where it's at. So we know that that's the fact. Or I was just thinking, do we want to talk about the campaign stuff because that's somewhat related to my campaign stuff? No, we'll do the Cyberpunk stuff first. That's fine. I don't think that should take long. Famous last words. Famous last words. I don't think it should take long. I don't feel like I have that much to say about the game. But we'll see. It's also not really the focus of our channel here. But yeah, it's something I'm dealing with, and I think that there's somewhat relational stuff. I do look at video games a lot as games that people enjoy, as a way to, as well as board games and stuff like that, as a way to draw comparisons and draw information into what I think about TTRPGs in general. And Okay. This kind of goes up there. And maybe I'll think, no, because this is related to this. This next one's related to this topic. Solo or GMless games as a stepping stone. But this was, again, maybe potentially a controversial take. But it's more of a clickbaity title. Doesn't have too few games. So the idea is that D&D doesn't have too few DMs. It has too many players. Which I think is a perspective shift as the issue, where we often think that, oh, D&D doesn't have enough dungeon masters. There are tons of people who want to play, but they can't find a dungeon master. Like, that's typically not really the issue. The issue is actually that we have too many players, and that's what I'm trying to intuit there, is that you have a lot of players who, in a lot of ways, kind of refuse to put anything into the game. That they expect their friend to do a whole bunch of work, and they sit down at the table and they get a few hours of enjoyment out of it, and they go, oh, that's great. And maybe I'll be back, or maybe I'm going to have a party next week, or whatever. I'm busy next week, so I can't play. But then whenever I'm not busy, and I have played with people like this before, where D&D was always their fallback plan. It was like they were always down to play D&D unless something else, they had some more interesting plans. And you knew that they were always out there looking for more interesting plans, and if they didn't find it, then they'd show up for D&D. And that's very different from the people who are like, no, D&D is the thing that I want to do on the weekend. So I show up to play D&D. I don't go, oh, well, if everything else falls back, I guess I'll play D&D with my friends. And that's a very different feeling. And I feel like the more contemporary D&D players fall more into that latter category, with this idea that all the work is on the dungeon master to like make all the cool stuff and make sure that my super unique snowflake character will fit into, even though I did not read the primer you set out for the campaign, and I paid no attention to the setting background you gave me. And I'm not saying like I gave them a huge dossier. I'm like, here's like a page of some stuff, the idea of the campaign that I want to run. Make sure that you're making a character that's kind of focused in on that, and if you have players who don't do that, and then are upset that like you're not bending over backwards to make the game for them, but how do you do that for 4 or 5 different people at the same time? And be like, it's just going to be a mess of a campaign that's not going to feel very good. Nobody's going to be happy with the outcome of that. The dungeon master's not going to be happy about it, and each individual player is not going to be happy about the outcome of that. And the idea that there is no way, D&D specifically does not have some sort of roadmap, some sort of plan to help transition people from getting into the game to becoming dungeon masters in their own right. Like, there is no game plan. There is no strategy. They're not doing anything. They've never done anything for that. Well, I should say at least in 5th edition. They've done nothing to support that. They don't really provide a lot of ways to make that happen for people. So it's not that the D&D has too few DMs, it's that it has too many players, and the quality of those players are really, really low. Because these are people who, I think, come into the hobby, and this is where I think we're getting to things like the Mercer effect, where you come into the hobby expecting things to be like, oh, well, I'd love to be in that Critical Role show. I'd love to have my own Critical Role that I go to every week, and that would be super fun. Now, am I a professional actor and improviser? No. Is my dungeon master a professional actor and improviser who gets paid to prep our sessions all week? No. So, wow, I'm really disgusted that the game didn't end up that way. You're like, well, that's an unreasonable expectation. Why would you have that expectation? Also, like, think about how bad something like Critical Role would be if we took out, I don't know, let's pull Taliesin Jaffe. Taliesin Jaffe, kick to the curb. You're out of here, bud. You're no good. We hate you. You're gone. Instead, we're bringing in Mark from Ohio. He's sitting there. Tell you what, people are not going to like Mark. And not because of the Taliesin thing, it's because you're not going to be a professional You're not a professional actor and improviser. You are not going to hold your own in that game. You are going to be the weak point. And I think that there is a lot of that that happens in our home games as well. But yeah, that's as far as we're going to get here. I'm going to take a short break, refill up on some coffee, and we'll come back. I'll talk a little bit about Cyberpunk, and then maybe we'll talk about sort of the campaign stuff. But yeah, hold on tight. We'll be back in just a few minutes. All right. Bye bye. All right, we're back. We're back, baby. We're back. All right. Yeah, we said we are going to talk about Cyberpunk 2077. I'm just going to pull this stuff up. Pull it up. Uh-huh. Yeah. 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 All right. Let's get some. Let's get some music that's a little bit more cyberpunky. But this one's probably okay. Yeah, let's get that. What else? Da, da, da. And maybe one more. Ooh, there's a cyberpunk. Oh, a cyberpunk bar and a city and yeah, there's lots of good stuff in here. Hopefully these aren't too loud. What's up in here? Hey. All right. Sorry, zooming out there. Look at the music stuff. Let's get into it. Oh, let's go. All right. So Cyberpunk 2077. Let's actually just pull it up. Pull it up. So, what are the reviews on it? Recent reviews, overwhelmingly positive. All reviews very positive. Now, very different from when it came out, which it's almost 5 years now. Wow, think about that is wild to think about. But I just started playing it. For those of you who are unfamiliar with my video game habits, I am a card-carrying member of Patient Gamers. If you don't know what that means, it means that I pretty much refuse to pay full price for a video game, and unless it's under very specific circumstances. The last video game that I bought at full price was Unicorn Overlord, which is a Switch title, and Vanillaware, which I knew was going to be goated. I knew it was one of those games when you see it and you look at it and you're like, did you guys make this game just for me? I feel like you guys made this game just for me. So if you're unfamiliar with that game, it is essentially a spiritual successor to the old Ogre Battle series, which, if you're under the age of probably 25, you're probably utterly unfamiliar with, but was it's a SRPG, so a strategic RPG, kind of, kind of. First on the Super Nintendo, March of the Black Queen. Most of them are named after Queen songs. So March of the Black Queen. Uh, then what comes next? I guess Person of Lordly Caliber, which is on Nintendo 64. Then there is the Ogre Battle Tactics, Let Us Clean Together, which is on the GBA, I think. And then that was all they made of them. And then Unicorn Overlord came out, different developer. And it's like the spiritual successor. And it's like, nobody knows about this game. Why did you bring this game out? I love it. I'm going to immediately buy it. Also, it's Vanillaware, which means that they have a hand-drawn 2D style, which is always beautiful, even though, uh, things like Dragon's Crown got a lot of flack because of its, depiction of what men and women look like. Primarily women, as is usual with that sort of thing. Where the guys are super huge and muscle bound, and the ladies have uh, ample tracts of land, let's say. Put it that way. I don't have a problem with it. It's super tropish. I think it leans into it. I guess it's one of those things where it's like I don't think it's trying to depict people in a reasonable way, so I don't think that it's an issue that they look unreasonable. They look like massive caricatures of the fantasy tropes that they are representing. That out of the way, let's talk about Cyberpunk. That's what we're here to talk about. So, Cyberpunk, I picked it up from the Steam Summer Sale, just happened a little bit ago. Picked it up along with the Phantom Liberty. just because it was finally on sale, and I was like, yeah, I should get that. I've been wanting to play it. Of course, like a lot of people, I knew when it first came out that it got a lot of bad reviews, was rushed, was clearly not ready to go out yet. But then over time, especially with Phantom Liberty, the DLC that came out, pretty well regarded, came out, and they see Project Red finally got around to fixing most of those bugs post. And then I was like, okay, now it's worth a purchase. And so it was on sale, picked it up, it's good. So my feelings about it. You know what? Let's look at just a few of the first top comments. So you can see down here the number of red ones because it was really buggy when it first came out. Now, I will be honest, I've run into some bugs, uh, but yeah, we'll talk about that. So let's see these. I don't really want to do, but yeah, you've got people. Ooh, almost 500 hours in the game. Woo, really doing everything in the game. Yeah, here, this looks like a good one. We'll just read this one. This is from Wings. All right, Chooms. If you're not familiar, there's Cyberpunk's got its own language. It's also built off the TTRPG of Cyberpunk, which came out in 1987, 88, 88, I think. Yeah. Anyways, so first, pen and paper tabletop RPG set in the cyberpunk future, written in 1988. That's a lot of background that would be really useful, I think, having going into this video game because it is retrofuturism. It is a 1980s version of what they thought the future would look like. Uh, so if you're playing the game and you'd be like, why is everything all weird? Why is the tech like this? And because it was retrofuturism. If you're not familiar with that term, that is retrofuturism is looking at an older times view of what the future would be like, and then playing in that sandbox. Other things, steampunk's kind of like that too. Steampunk, very Jules Verne kind of inspired about what they thought steam was the steam engine was sort of like the new disrupting technology of the time, and so they're like, well, obviously that will continue, and that will be the basis for what other things are built off of that. And of course, then we have things like the internal combustion engine, which they hadn't foreseen, because when you explain the internal combustion engine to people, as they did with Napoleon, it gets a little weird. Napoleon was pitched the idea of ironclad warships and steamships, and his idea was like, okay, so you're going to propel this ship, a wooden ship, by a setting a fire below its decks. That seems like a bad idea, kind of like hot air balloons. The idea that it is wicker and cloth propelled by fire. Sounds like a bad idea when you say it like that, but relatively okay. Internal combustion engine is kind of the same. Hey, by the way, so we think that this will propel you by having a series of small explosions happen within it. Well, that doesn't sound safe. And, sometimes it's not, but most of the time it is very safe. And so, same thing. So, that's the retrofuturism. So, it's helpful to know that kind of stuff. But because it has this tabletop RPG, it's got a lot of its own sort of slang and in a very sort of, I think, God, I can't even remember the author's name at this point, um, leaning in on things like A Clockwork Orange story, where there's all this like slang that's used, and it's kind of hard to understand. So Cyberpunk has that, but it's helpful to know that sort of context for it and understand why you have a game that's set in the future, but then at the same time feels very much antiquated. That's the retrofuturism. All right, Chooms, I'll admit Cyberpunk was something I was very skeptical about, starting after all these years. I think we've all seen how things went with this game on release, but it does seem like an overwhelming majority of the main issues from back then have been fixed. While I still encountered a large amount of bugs, after that, it wasn't in particular anything super game breaking to ruin the experience. Yeah, so far, mine. I think the funniest thing that's happened to me so far is that I've had to chase down a sliding body to get some loot off of it. That's about it. And sprint down a body that was sliding down the roadway to grab it. down the tarmac. But otherwise, yeah, it's been pretty good. Not too bad. There are several things about this game that just hit different. I truly love the dynamic between V and Johnny, and it really does set the story apart from many others out there. Visually, I adore the atmosphere of Night City, and driving through the streets just felt so welcoming. I would get lost in the beauty of it. Characters that V meets and befriends are also enjoyable from their personalities to their storylines. My only wish is that hanging out was a thing. All in all, I do believe the game is genuinely worth a play, as I think it has something for everyone. Okay. Mm, So yeah, I'd agree. Again, I'm only 25 hours in, which seems like I should be a lot further in the game, but most of that stuff that I've done is very side content. I have one of the, I think, more rare accomplishments as to doing all the side missions in the starting area. Watson, right? Watson's the name of the starting neighborhood that you're in, and doing all the side missions in Watson, which apparently a very small percentage of all players on Steam have done. I was like, oh, I really expected that number to be a lot higher than that. It's a single digit number, let's put it that way. So yeah, I'm about 25 hours into it, but I haven't gone very far in the story. Obviously, I'm through the prologues. I'm into the story proper now, but I also not very far into it, so I haven't gotten too far along with V and Johnny's relationship. For those of you, and I don't think this is a spoiler of anything for this game because it was in the promo marketing for it, you basically have a secondary AI construct of a living person from the past who is lodged in your mind. And so you kind of have this weird ghost who kind of, the only you can see that kind of talks to you about stuff and implements you. There's more stuff going on, but I don't want to ruin any of the game for any of you who, for some reason, haven't played it at this point. Maybe you're like me and you haven't picked it up yet. So there's that. So I can't speak too much about that. I do think, at least in the beginning, Johnny's kind of annoying. I'm not gonna lie. There, I haven't really had a conversation with Johnny that I thought was like, oh man, like that made the game better. I'm gonna guess that that will change. It's very early on in the story with Johnny and V, your main character, is still kind of like, I gotta deal with this thing that's like a parasite in my mind and not really taking it seriously. Well, not seriously, not incorporating it into what they're doing. They're more like this is a distraction about stuff and kind of pushing it off. So there's that. The atmosphere of Night City and driving through the streets. And to be honest, I don't really feel that. I think Night City's fine, but it does feel like just this weird urban sprawl, which is kind of what it's supposed to feel like. But there's nothing about. I feel like when I play it, there aren't enough people walking around, and there aren't enough cars on the road that makes sense to me. As massive of a city as Night City's supposed to be, like traffic should be like LA or New York. It should basically be at a standstill almost all the time. Now, obviously, that doesn't work very well with a game in which driving around in cars is supposed to be kind of a main point of the game, at least for how it's being sold to me. But yeah, I'm like, it's not. Also, I don't find the car control super great. I think the cars don't really have a lot of weight to them. They slip and slide a whole bunch. Even some of the heavier cars kind of feel like that, but even cars that are supposed to be pretty well like tuned feel like they fishtail all the time. I feel like it's one of the few games I'll say this is a video game. It's one of the few games in which I prefer riding a bike to driving a car. Usually I feel the exact opposite way. Usually I feel like bikes are way too fast and I can't control them at all. And cars are much easier to get around with and have a lot more control of. This feels the exact opposite way. I feel like I have way more control on a bike than I do in a car, which includes like traction and staying on the road, which is very weird to me. I don't know why it feels that way. And it's got I'd say it's got the GTA style of car. A lot of 2077 Cyberpunk is very I'd say mm, yeah, I'd say GTA reminiscent. It feels like the blueprint. It feels like they took GTA and they took Assassin's Creed and just kind of smashed those things together and kind of did a cyberpunk paint job over it. The only thing that I will say is that the cars don't have any stats, which kind of sucks. The cars and bikes don't really have any stats that you can see, so it's hard to tell. Is one going to be better for me than the other? I don't know. The only way to do that is to spend kind of a large amount of credits on that to buy it, to figure it out, or steal a car or pick up a car and drive it around and see if there's just one you like. So I haven't really had that great of experience with the round town. And again, there's just not enough people. The one place I've run into where there was more people than I thought there should be for this game is there's a park section. And I go in the park and I was like, there's people everywhere in this park. That's weird. That's weird to me. Like, why aren't there as many people walking up and down the streets? So that makes me think it's like a technical limit. But I will say, like, something like GTA 5's traffic made more sense to me. Like, I feel like there's, again, there probably should be more cars, but that felt like the appropriate amount of traffic and people walking around. I don't feel like Night City has quite that volume. Enough that I kind of pointed out and be like, there's nobody really walking around, and there aren't that many cars on the street. Suffice it to say that I have never run across the street thus far, and I jaywalk and just run across the street all the time without looking. And I haven't gotten hit by a car, which I think in GTA I could never do. I think I would always get hit by a car going by, and unless I was paying attention, or playing something like Yakuza, always getting hit by a car in Yakuza if I'm trying to cross the street and I'm not paying attention. Uh, and in the Yakuza game, getting hit by a car is bad. It really hurts your health real bad. It's almost like you got hit by a car. Uh, so that's it. The weapons feel all right. Yeah, the weapons feel good. The gunplay's good. Uh, the melee combat's a little bit Skyrim-esque. I wish there was a little bit more to it. The There's some punching. There's some like bare knuckle boxing stuff that you do pretty early on in the game. There's a whole mission for it, series of missions, I should say. And quest line, I guess, is the correct term. And those feel alright. I feel like I did the first one. The first one was pretty good. The first combat they throw you in for the bare knuckle boxing, outside of the tutorial, is you gotta fight two guys. And I'm like, that's a big jump from training dummy to immediately fighting two guys. And then the one after that is you fight one guy, and I'm like, oh, okay. I thought it was gonna be even weirder and weirder. And I definitely had more trouble with the first combat against two guys than I did with the second one with just one guy. But at that point, I think there was a level discrepancy as well. I'm not sure how the scaling works. Enemies definitely scale with you, but I don't know to what point. As far as like the street games, there's a lot of street games. There's a lot of side missions. That's very much the Ubisoft kind of sandbox style, and that's why I was really surprised. I was in such a small percentage for just clearing out one of the neighborhoods of all the secondary side quests. I know there's a lot. I think there's 150 NCPD quests. Quests. They're just things you can do, which felt immediately took me back to Assassin's Creed, not Origins as much as what's the Greek one? Odyssey, where you're like, oh, here's a tiny little like outpost fort with some guys in it. Oh, you show up there, you kill all the guys, you clear it, and then you're done with it. That's sort of how the side quests are set up, and so it has it has a sandbox in that very Ubisoft sort of sandbox way, in which there is a ton of stuff to run across. None of it is particularly entertaining or important. Even the side quests are like, are you prepared to read a bunch of data shards, which are like thumb drives? Are you prepared to just read random conversations between people? Not really. I'm not as a side quest. I don't really care that much. Not even a quest, just a side activity most of the time. Most of them are not particularly interesting. Maybe they'd be more interesting if I sat down and really like read them, but I haven't. So maybe that's a player issue. But combat's all right. I feel like I am doing a jack of all trades kind of run, in which I'm pretty even kill across all my abilities and my skills, which I think will be a problem in the late game. In the early game, it's great because I feel like I can do just about everything. But in the late game, I'm already getting to the point that I feel like I'm outstripped where I'm not able to do certain things because I don't have a high enough like tech ability or strength ability or whatever it is to like force open doors or to hack things. There's the upgrade system, which I don't feel is very important. I feel like most players probably didn't invest in the upgrade system, where you get scraps and you're able to like. There are certain weapons which are gold weapons that you can always upgrade up through the different tiers of weapons, so they always get better. So first, you don't come across a lot of them. I think in the 25 hours, I think I have 5 of them. That's like once for every 5 hours. Probably if I do more mainline quests, I'll probably get more hands on them. But also, they just haven't been as good. I don't think I used one gold pistol for a little bit, and then after that, everything else I've got is higher tier, better gear. There's just stuff that you churn through. They're very much like you choose weapons where the numbers go up that are green. Very similar style. So that's fun. One of the things that I wish they had told me that I can't I guess I forget. They bring it up in the mission with Jackie when you go to the hotel, and I guess I didn't realize that was supposed to be like a tutorial moment where you take something out of the trunk, but it shows Jackie pulling something out of the trunk to give. No, I think you just keep it. But anyways, it shows Jackie pulling something out of the trunk, but I didn't. What it didn't tell me is like, hey, if you go to the trunk of a vehicle, you can access your stash. I didn't know that until I was like 15 hours into the game. I was like, oh, you mean I don't have to go back to my like apartment to like dump off all the stuff I want to keep, which is primarily clothing? It's like, oh, I didn't know I could just like walk to the back of my vehicle and access my stash from that. That would have been helpful to know. So maybe there was a prompt and I just missed it though. Maybe that was a user thing, but it was like that was a weird thing I didn't know I could do. So yeah, any other thoughts? So the combat's good. Uh, Gotten hacked a few times in combat, so that's been an interesting thing to deal with. If you get hacked, and also hacking people with combat, but I'd say most combats kind of play out the same. That's been my experience. It's very rare that combat happens to you. I'll put it that way. By that means, I mean you almost always instigate combat, which is great because it allows you to immediately hack people or throw a grenade right at the started some grouped enemies and like clear out some stuff really easy early on. The only downside is that I combats kind of go through the same progression steps. It's like, oh, I see a group of enemies. I'm going up to do a thing. Well, there's 3 of them grouped around one central point. That looks like a point in which I should throw a grenade. Oh, I see that there's like a tough enemy in the back. Well, I'm going to use my gear and hack them, and put burn on them or something, or contagion, or suicide, or grenade detonation, or something. Do something that's going to challenge them because they're going to be the most difficult character in the combat. There's a lot of lucrative. I think CD Projekt Red did a lot of good work to enable a lot of different playstyles, especially stealth. I see a lot of stealth options in the game. Here's the thing: is that I don't really jive with stealth games, uh, and that's very much a me thing. Because I feel like when I try to do a stealth section, what generally happens is that it feels like I'm waiting to play my own game rather than actively play it. I just don't find it entertaining to be like, I've got to sit here for 1 to however many minutes waiting, even though, yeah, let's say 1 minute. If I have to stop playing my game to wait for a guard to turn the other direction, and all I'm doing is sitting there waiting, that's not entertaining to me. Now, for other people really like stealth games, but for me, it's just like, it's just not a gameplay that I like. I'd rather go in guns blazing. Um, but yeah, that's kind of my thoughts on it. So, what do you think? Is it something that you would recommend? Or is it something that you would rather just sit back and enjoy? Or And I think that's why. And I wonder what the difference is between something like that and something like the stealth archer build in something like Skyrim. Like, why does everybody go to the stealth archer build in Skyrim, whereas I get frustrated? I don't get frustrated doing that in Skyrim, but I do get frustrated trying to do stealth in things like the stealth and stuff in games like this or Deus Ex. And why do those or Thief those style of stealth games? And so I'm not sure what the difference is. I don't know. I don't know what that is. I'd have to think about that a little bit. I think there's maybe some more meat to chew on there, like as to what the balance is for that, or why I never was able to really get into the Metal Gear games very much. Because waiting on enemies to do their patrol to get to the certain point that I need them to get to, so I can do my 2 seconds of gameplay and move on. If I have to wait longer than the thing I'm waiting on, and that's not enjoyable to me. But I think I'm in the minority there because I think there are a lot of people who really love stealth gameplay. So I think maybe that's just a me thing. Let's see. Do I have anything else to talk about that? Let's see. Visually, yeah, things look great. The only performance issues I feel like I ran into in the game is anytime that there's one specific spot that I walked through where it was like a market, like a night market spot that was filled with fog, and my GPU did not like that. My graphics card was like chugging to do all the fog occlusion. So I didn't like that, but otherwise it's performed pretty well. I should probably reduce the settings a little bit. I do think the motion blur is a little high. I'm usually not a person who's bothered by motion blur, but there's a lot of motion blur in the game, so I might want to turn that down a little bit. Especially like running, there's a lot of jumpy animation when you're running, so I might want to change that. The police are a little over aggressive, but they're also relatively easy to lose. So it's tit for tat. It's like it's really hard in a lot of circumstances to not shoot a civilian because they're like gang members in the middle of civilians oftentimes. And then once you open up the firefight, which is almost always you opening it up, as you expect, people panic and scream and run in all directions. Oftentimes they run right in front of you while you're trying to shoot somebody, shoot one of the bad guys, and then you shoot them, and then somehow the police are automatically notified that somebody got an innocent bystander got shot and show up. But the nice thing is that getting away from the police is actually not very difficult with the way that Night City is laid out. If you basically just get off the street, you'll probably be fine. They lose interest really quickly. Like if you duck down an alley and run into like a parking lot or up some stairs around things, there's a lot of verticality in the city as well. If you go up on a rooftop or to a second story or something like that, or go below street level, cops will pretty much immediately lose you. So it's very easy to get away from them, even though they're triggered very quickly. I did one thing where I accidentally got like all 5 stars. Maybe not 5 stars. Maybe I only have 4 stars. No, I think I got 5 stars. And I think that was the one time that I really got like, oh, I'm just gonna die. There's too many people here, and they're all big and bad, and there's multiple like armored personnel carriers chasing me and stuff like that. It was like, all right, I'm just gonna die here. There's no way I'm gonna be able to get away from this. And it took me a long time to realize how I was setting off the cops, that I was shooting innocent people. That innocent people were running in front. And then there's an entire type of gun that is the ricochet that allows you to do like ricochet bullets. So you're even more likely if you're using that and saying a shotgun or something like that, where you're going to have bullets shrapnel bouncing all around, that you're likely to hit a bystander and immediately get targeted by the cops. Now the nice thing is that one of the good things, that another way to lose the cops is that if you get tagged by the cops and they start chasing you, is to immediately run into another sort of like gang encounter. There's a bunch of street gangs in the game. Is to immediately run into another street gang encounter or run through it, and they will immediately start opening up on the cops, and then you can just let them fight it out while you run away, which helps a lot. Other things, I think probably my only other big criticism of the game is that I think the music stinks. I'm sorry. I wish I had nice things to say about the music, but the music's just awful. The radio is real bad. There's like what, 8, 10 stations, something like that. They rarely feel cohesive. They'll have stuff that's like the rock station, and then it feels like it starts playing rap, and I'm like, what? Or yeah, everything's kind of got techno and stuff. And then another criticism I saw online, I was like, yeah, that is true. And so there really is no synthwave in the game. It's like, how are you going to make a cyberpunk game with no synthwave or outrun music? Like that is the genre for it. That is the music genre equivalent of cyberpunk. Like, why are you not? Why is that not in there? And there are tons of synthwave. I listen to synthwave and all the time, well, all the time, pretty regularly. I listen to synthwave music, and there's none of it in the game. And it's just like, man, that seems like such a lost opportunity. And so many of them, yeah, it's unfortunate. I think that there's only a handful of songs I actually like. And another person said, I wish there was an option like there is in GTA where you can just import music and make your own radio station. Like, man, that would have been really nice. I really wish I could have done that. Or, may, and maybe there is one, but I don't think so, where you can make a custom station where you can pull songs you like from different radio stations and pull them in. Because, like I said, there's only a handful of songs that I've come across in my many hours, 25 hours of playing now, that I actually like listening to. Most of them are really dog. They're not very good at all, to be honest. And I like to think that I have a pretty wide palette of music that I listen to and enjoy. Everything from classical and jazz and rock. Not as much hip hop, not a ton of hip hop, but I do like some hip hop. Hip hop, but there's not a lot of great like electronic music. There's not any synthwave. There's not any outrun. There's not any. Even the jazz station only has like a handful of songs, and the songs they did pick are kind of weird in some places. Like it really fits that sort of, if I want to go real like techno noir, cyberpunk kind of style, like Blade Runner kind of style, where you pull in that noir aspect of like the jazz and it feels right. And then other places, some of the jazz music they picked was like this would not fit in noir. I don't know why this is in here. It's like weird bebop stuff. Like it's not, it doesn't fit the tone. So a really missed opportunity with the music. Really kind of probably some of the lowest lows. So as far as the story, I can't say much about it right now. And I hope it's good. I'll find out. It's let's say the game is good enough that I'm going to continue playing. The phone's a little annoying, but otherwise, yeah, things are pretty good in the game. I've enjoyed it, and I want to see where it goes. So I think, yeah, and would I recommend it? Yeah, if you haven't played it, I'd say recommend it. Try it out. Uh, if that seems like the sort of thing you're interested in. Did I have an enjoyable time driving around the city? No, I don't think I've ever had a more enjoyable driving game than, well, the two enjoyable driving games that I can think of off the top of my head is one is man, I'm blanking on the name. Sleeping Dogs. So that's one. If you, it's on here. Let's look it up. So if you haven't played it, there we go. Sleeping Dogs. This is an older game, but if you haven't played it, it's hey, would you like a GTA in Hong Kong where you use kung fu to fight people most of the time? That's Sleeping Dogs. It was really supposed to be a different series. I can't remember what series, a different police series, but it's quite good. I enjoyed it. I enjoyed it. This is the game that I drove around and I was like, ooh, this feels good. Like this is a good driving experience. And it also, like you can see it right there in that Hong Kong shot. It's like that feels even that very cyberpunk. Right, you got all the neon. It's also like raining every 5 minutes in Hong Kong, which I don't know if that's. I can't imagine that's true to real life Hong Kong, but in the game, you're like, man, it's raining for all the time in here. Like, how is this place not flooded? But yeah, it's got a lot of cool stuff. It's got the cool sort of. It's focused a little bit more on brawling, which is a cool style for the game. You don't use guns all that often. I mean, you do in the later games, but there's a lot of cool like martial arts stuff that's in there, which feels very much kind of like a John Woo kind of movie style Hong Kong gangster. It's it's real fun. It's obviously old now. It came out. This is the definitive version. Came out over a decade ago. So yeah, I realize I'm old. It's fine. But it's a good game. But that is one of my top driving experiences. Is that cars? The car control is okay in the game. It's not great. It's not like a driving game, but it does feel good. Like it's got the right vibe. Let's put it that way. It's got the right vibe. And what was the other game I was going to say? It's, they're really good driving. I love driving around in. Oh, the Mad Max game. When you have a game that's totally built, you can get it for $3. It's an overworld game. It's fine. Combat's meh. But driving around in a car is fun. And of course, this is Mad Max, so it's all in like a post-apocalyptic kind of desert. There are roads, but it's got that feel to it. But it definitely does give you sort of this feel that driving around is fun, and you get to customize your car and do all that stuff. So especially because there's a lot of car combat that's in it. It's trailer a little bit. Yeah. So yeah, there's a lot of driving around and blowing stuff up, and it's fun. It gives you what you should do. There's a really cool sequence in that game where you're in like an airport terminal that's been buried under the sand, and that's like a long driving section in this big airport, and it's really cool. It's one of the more fun chase scenes, I guess, I've experienced in the game. It felt fun with the car physics. That all felt really cool. And so, again, neither of these are like AAA titles. Both of those are kind of like B titles, but they focus in on doing that specific portion really well. So yeah, don't watch the trailer. But yeah, those are kind of my feelings about Cyberpunk. It's okay. Like I'm gonna keep playing it, but it does have that feeling, which was very much how I feel a lot about a lot of I think the Assassin's Creed kind of games. Also, in a way, GTA 2. It's like it's fine. I guess we should before I close it out. I should talk a little bit about the cyber updates. You're um, getting chromed. Getting chromed is cool. I think it's a good way to kind of customize your play style by building your character in that way. So if you want to have slice and dice arms, if you want to be able to like double jump, that's a thing you can purchase in the game. Even though that makes no sense how your legs are able to jump on nothing. Whatever. There's a lot of verticality in the game, so having the ability to double jump will save you a lot of time. So it is a really nice thing. There is falling damage. It's usually not too bad unless you're really high up, though. But you get some cool optic stuff you can do, cool leg stuff, lots of stuff. You get smart weapons that allow you to like automatically lock onto people by porting it in. You have that nice like data cable and hacking stuff that's like in your body, which is very different from like Netrunners run a little bit differently in Cyberpunk than something like Deckers do in Shadowrun, where it's like no, you have a deck, you have like a laptop that you carry around with you. So it's a little bit different. But yeah, I think they're functional. Yeah, I think there's a lot more. I think there's maybe a little bit more noise than there needs to be, but maybe that's probably a me thing because I think depending on what style of gameplay that you're going through that you really want to focus in on, I think there's something in there for you. So I think having that ability to modify your body to do what you want to do is really, really cool. So yeah, that's it for Cyberpunk. It's been fun. I'm interested to say I think the story they're gonna have to wow me with the story, which they haven't really done so far. Um, I felt like everything that happens in the prologue with Jackie is very like written on the wall. There's not really any surprises there. Everything seems pretty straightforward. So I'm hoping that maybe the story gets a little bit better. I think I'm spoiled, but also things like The Witcher 3, also obviously put out by CD Projekt Red. So I was expecting, oh, that has such a great story. And I was really expecting a lot more out of Cyberpunk 2077, but like I said, I'm still really early on as far as the plot is concerned, so I'm hoping that that probably gets better. But yeah, that's it. That's all we're going to talk about Cyberpunk. We're going to get back on task a little bit. We're going to talk about my actual campaign that I'm running. Talk a little bit about that. So we'll jump out of this. I think we can just go chatting. I don't think we're going to need to look at anything. I got a couple of notes here I want to talk about. So we've got our. We'll change the music too. What do we think for music? We're just going to be chatting a little bit. So let's find something here. Let's say maybe like a market or something like that. I don't want something that's too loud. Let's do that. We can have that one. We'll have these things in. Those should hopefully be good. Get up here. Take out a few of these, all the cyberpunk stuff. Okay. All right. All right. Cyberpunk trailer still staring me in the face, so we're gonna move that. we're gonna hop off of that real quick. All right. I'll pull down about that so I'm not blowing myself out with that white light. All right. So yeah, let's take a step back. So, like I said, actually, I could just open the document. That might actually be helpful. Let's go up a little bit. Let's go to our Friday night campaign, and then we'll take a look at it. We'll get our session run. So, like I said, we've run about we got a full-on dozen now. Had a dozen play sessions in our campaign. It's so bright. Can you bring that down a little bit? Yeah, let's do that. Ooh, that made me really orange. Let's oh, I guess that won't work. All right, well, we don't need it, and I don't want to be staring into a white screen that I'm not having to look at. So we are a dozen sessions into the campaign, and let's talk a little bit about that. Like I said, we don't have anything, and they're still in the middle of going through their dungeon, which really should be probably their second dungeon, but it's still their first dungeon. So I do want to talk a little bit about this, the status of the campaign as a little retrospective where we're at. So, current things that are kind of going on in the campaign. So, dozen sessions in, guess what? Still level 1. Like I said, I said this before. I prefaced this very early on. I think when we were doing our session 0, I'm pretty sure, if not before. I was like, hey, we're not using XP leveling, and we're going to use a style of milestone leveling that I like to do. It's like, all you guys have to do to level up is accomplish something of note. You guys have, a dozen sessions in, and you guys still have not accomplished anything of note. And that's why you guys are still level 1. Talk about. And there is some frustration now, certainly from the players, and from myself too, at them being level 1. Because let's say, and in a lot of sessions, we'll be honest, especially after this last Dark Mantle fight, where they nearly TPK'd, just off of bad dice rolls and some interesting player decisions, let's put it that way. Like I said, they're not particularly tactical players, and I tend to be a more tactical player. So when I'm in the DM seat, you're going to have some tough combats. And so if you're not prepared for those combats, if you're not ready to rock 'em sock 'em, they're going to punch you. They're going to kick you in the teeth real hard. Like I said, they nearly got TVK'd by what is a bog standard moderate encounter. Just right down the middle of the line. Not easy, not difficult, absolutely perfectly moderate. But of course, the CR doesn't take into account the environment that you're playing, which can be a massive part of a combat. And in this one, you have a room that has ambush monsters in it. The ambush monsters, they plan to ambush you, so they're going to put themselves in a position to ambush things. So, yeah, they got ambushed. Yes, they did. It was very interesting. You walk into a room, You describe the room, and I'm like, okay, it's this rectangular room. Most of the room's floor is taken up by this recessed pool that's in there, and there's like a 5-foot walkway around the edge of the room. But most of it is this pool that's in the middle of the room, and it has a skeleton that's standing out of it, up to about hip, waist deep, thereabouts in it, facing the other way, not moving, kind of limply bent over. The floor is pretty unremarkable. Walls are formed of living stone, but they're not dressed, but they are cleaned up. The part of the room that does look like it's been thing is that it's got a barrel vault with coffers in it. And then there's no light in the room. That's what you see with your light. Now, this is where this is about not necessarily. Well, I guess in a way it is sort of like learning to be a better player is paying attention to things like room descriptions. This is where sometimes you get into trouble, right? Every DM has experience with this if you play for any amount of time, in which the players have decided to hyper-focus on something that's not important in the room. This time, my players decided to hyper-focus on the skeleton that's in the middle of the pool. Even after they realized that they moved the light close to it and it didn't move at all, it didn't have any reaction. It's like, okay, because they were still outside the room at this point, and they just moved the light up to it. They had light cast on a stone, I think, with Mage Hand moving it. So moved it up to the skeleton didn't do anything, didn't react at all. Like, okay, you have focused on the wrong thing. The skeleton is there, importantly, to tell you information about the room, which is that, hey, something died in this room. That might be a sign that there's something bad in this room. But also, like, the top half of it is decomposed. You don't know what's going on with the bottom half of it. So then they're like, oh, well, the pool must be full of slimes or jellies. And like, okay, that's not an unreasonable idea, considering that previously, in the previous dungeon that they had abandoned did have oozes in it. Did have an ooze in it. A gray ooze, I believe? And they came across and had to fight it. So they were obviously wary about that. They investigate a little bit and be like, hey, that's clearly not it. But if you as a player are like, hey, this is weird that the rest of this room is really nondescript, except the Dungeon Master went out of their way to specifically talk about the ceiling. Maybe the ceiling's important. And this is also just a player skill thing. You play D&D enough, you're like, I always look at the ceiling. It doesn't. After a few things drop on top of you in a few adventures, you're like, yeah, I look at the ceiling. I want to make sure there's nothing on the ceiling. And 99% of the time, there's never going to be anything on the ceiling. But sometimes there is stuff on the ceiling, and you need to pay attention to the ceiling. So if your Dungeon Master takes the time to tell you about the ceiling, it means the ceiling's probably important. Otherwise, they probably wouldn't bring it up. How often in room descriptions, whether that's box text that you're reading out of an adventure module or you've created a room, do you be like, oh, and this is what the ceiling looks like? It's generally not very often. So if the Dungeon Master is like, hey, and it's got this very unique, like a barrel vault is kind of a weird thing to have. Not super weird in a dungeon, but it does happen. And coffers. Okay, why are the coffers important? Now, it could just be architectural flourish, but the rest of the room is incredibly plain and utilitarian. So what's going on with that roof, huh? What's going on with the ceiling? Well, I know. That's where the dark mantles are hiding. They're clung up on the ceiling because that's what dark mantles do, and they've got the coffers, so they're hiding in them. And obviously they jump down and grab the skeleton. Now, going back, would I have changed that? If there's something I changed about that description, what would I have done? I probably would have had the skeleton facing them. But the truth is they could have come in from the other doorway. There's another doorway on the other side, so 50% whether the skeleton's going to be looking at you or not. But one of the things I could have done is make sure that it was always facing them whenever they came into the room. That is something I could have done, and I didn't do. Because I think if they did, they would have seen that the front part, like its frontal lobe space, like the front and facial part was cracked open, like it had been broken open. which is the Dark Mantle slurping out their brains with their hard beak. They crack through the skull and eat their brains out, which could have been maybe an extra clue. So I don't know. Sometimes I always feel like I don't want to give too much information. Like I want there to be like a sense of mystery and danger without having to tell like obliquely or not being a little oblique, not like just fully telling them, be like, oh, yep, there's a dead guy in this room, and this is what it looks like he died from, and very similar to like you telegraph the danger by showing things rather than just being like, oh, there's clearly monsters in this room, guys. But I like to build dungeons that have details that you can pick up, and if you take a moment to investigate that, you're going to learn something that's going to give you clues about something else that's going on. That's the way that I like to build dungeons. I think it's a very and not really emergent. What's the word I'm looking for? Diegetic. It's a very diegetic way to like give secrets and clues about stuff that's going on. It's like, hey, you check out this and you see that's going on with that thing, then maybe that gives you an idea of something that's gives you an idea about what's to come up. So if you have the ceiling and then if the skeleton was turned the right way, it'd be like, oh, there's probably a monster somewhere on the ceiling, or a monster somewhere further in the dungeon that did this. You can telegraph stuff further out like that. So yeah, I think that's sort of like one of the things that I'm struggling with a little bit is that I feel like that's the way that I build things as dungeon masters. I set up things to be like, here is the situation, and you're gonna need to do some context clues. You're gonna need to do a little bit of that thinky thing. You're gonna have to use that squishy gray matter. Use those folds in your brain to like piece some stuff together instead of just being like, up. Because the other opportunity is to be like, up, dark mantles fall from the ceiling and attack you, but they don't use their one special ability, which is to cast darkness. So you see them, and then it's a super easy encounter because dark mantles have like 11 AC, so they're super easy to hit. Uh, and that's how I feel like a lot of dungeon masters, especially dungeon masters who complain about like, oh, I can't challenge my players. It's like, but you're not using the monsters the way the monsters are meant to be used. Like you read the Dark Mantle stat block, and I bet we can pull it up real quick. Like it's clearly meant to be an ambush monster. Here, we got D&D Beyond. Here we go. Let's pull this up. So here's the Dark Mantle. Echolocation. It remains motionless, is indistinguishable from a cave formation such as a stalactite or stalagmite. Why it would be on the ground, who knows, because these things are supposed to fly. This is also a weird thing. I don't really know why they have false appearance. They're already good at stealth, and they're generally in places where there's no light, anyways. I don't know. That seems like a little overkill for me. But, so they have crush. That's their main thing. So basically, their idea is they drop down and they attach on target. A creature can detach from the Dark Mantle by making a strength check. So this is the thing. So it seems very clear. They try to drop down on unsuspecting foes. They use their darkness ability because they have blind sight, which is echolocation. So which means that they don't need light at all because they have echolocation. They're mainly meant to drop their darkness if it's not dark already. To get rid of any sort of light sources that the player characters may have and drop down on them. Now the thing is that they have to maintain concentration. So when you're in a situation like we were with the combat that just happened in our last session, they drop down on it and characters have disadvantage on attack rolls. And just some bad rolls meant that they really hard to hit them. I think they hit one Dark Mantle while it had its magical aura up. And unfortunately, I just rolled really well on the Constitution saving throw for the concentration check. I think I rolled like an 18 on the 17, 18 on the dice, and all of it. So I was like, yep, that'll do her. So dark vision can't penetrate the darkness, and no natural light can illuminate it. If the darkness overlaps an area of light created by a spell of second level or lower, the spell creating the light. Oh, it's dispelled. Oh, so I forgot that part. I did not dispel their light because their mage hand should have, the light that they dropped on should have immediately dispelled. I didn't do that. That's all right. Basically, just say our cleric ended up dispelling that and casting light again anyway, so it was effectively the same thing. The only difference is that he walked into the shadows and then walked back out of the darkness on one turn, and at that point, that should have dispelled his light spell. Though that would have just made the combat even worse for them. So I'm glad I didn't do that. They also have a pretty good hit to hit. +5 to hit for what, like a quarter CR character? Half CR character is pretty good. Just to clarify, Drell's superior dark vision and or warlock with double sight can see perfectly fine in the darkness aura. Yes, that is correct. Because they can see through magical darkness. The Drow because they cast magical darkness, and that's just the warlock vision. And I only know that because the other game that I play in, one of our characters is a warlock and has double sight and can see through magical darkness. That's the only way that I know that. So yeah. So I think that's one of the struggles I'm coming into is I'm waiting for the players to like just kind of be. I hate to phrase it this way, but just kind of be better players. It feels rough. Just to be like, hey, you guys keep getting your butts kind of kicked by monsters. You maybe want to adjust what you're doing to maybe be a little better at that. This is very different than because I don't think they've had a combat that they've just really kicked the butt of. No, most of the combats kick their butts. And again, most of these combats are balanced, but they are balanced for the 2024 rule set, which beefed up, or they beefed up the encounter difficulty by requiring more monsters by encounter, by basically making the CRs effectively lower in the XP budget, so they're worth less. So you add more monsters to combat. That's why this is a CR challenge 1/2. So for a first level party, that should have been 2 by the 2014 rules. By the 2024 rules, that's 3 monsters. So slightly different, and it ends up making a huge difference, especially in the low levels. So now I've learned that, hey, I probably can't throw moderate encounters at them. If I throw a moderate encounter at them with any sort of environmental effect or any sort of thing like this darkness aura that's really going to put them on their heels, they're not going to adapt. That's what I'm learning, is that I have some players that they just don't seem like they're prepared to adapt a lot. And they're frustrated with being level 1. I'm starting to become frustrated with them being level 1. Simply because I was like, all you guys got to do is you got to do something of note. That doesn't necessarily have to be combat, but you guys have to make some sort of broader impact in the world, and because we're playing heroic fantasy style of game, for the better. Like you guys need to go out and make some sort of broader impact for the not the full world, but like the local community at least, in a beneficial way. And they abandoned the first dungeon after their first combat in it. So, and then that you want to talk about getting caught off guard as a dungeon master, and they're like, "Yeah, we're gonna abandon the dungeon in the second room, or second room, yeah, second room of the dungeon, and we're just not gonna do it. We're not gonna go. It's not like we're gonna rest and come back. We're just not gonna do it." Oh, okay. I mean, that's weird. It's a fun. First of all, it's a fun dungeon. I think so. I made it. I think it's fun. Um, it has a lot of interesting stuff kind of going on where they could give you some more insight about stuff that's going on in the world and all those kinds of things. But all right, if you guys don't want to do that, that's fine, I guess. And then go back and lie to the quest giver about it and give them false information. and that stuff has continued to degrade, and they get news of that degrading over time. So yeah, there's this level 1 frustration, and at the end of the last session, I did have a player that was like, their takeaway from this is like, I never want to start a campaign at first level again. I never want to play first level characters. It's like I need to want to start any campaign going forward at third level at least. And I'm like, all right, that's already cutting out 10% of the game just if you were playing 1 through 20. Now the likelihood that you're going to play a 20th level game is really unlikely. So let's say that you're in that sweet spot from 3 to 7. So you want an entire campaign that's going to be 4 levels of play, not anything to get up to that. It's a bummer for me because I really like low level play. It just requires you to play smarter and not rely on the power of your character rather than your maybe own cleverness as a player. Because they could have tried to sneak through that room. They could have decided they could have run into their first thing with the Dark Mantles and been like, "We got to get out of here." But they were like, "Nope, we're going to stay in here and fight these things, even though it's an incredibly disadvantageous situation, and we're getting our butts kicked, and we can't see, and PCs are starting to drop." And they're like, "But we're still going to fight." Sounds good. Sounds like a smart decision. So yeah, there's just, and this kind of leads into my next point, which is just this passive versus active players. And this is something that I think is a very, this is a very, it's like almost like a generational difference, as we talked about in the real world. It's like a generational difference between players. And we're talking about players who are like pre 5th edition versus only 5th edition going forward. People who have only gotten into the hobby in the last 10 years, which is wild to think that this has been the style of play for 10 years already. Uh, but that's only 20% of D&D's like lifespan. So you have this sort of player, and I think we saw some of this in 3rd edition and 4th edition, but I think it's reached its furthest away point from the start here, 5th edition 2024, which is kind of this idea that players are very passive. That has been sort of my experience with them, is that they're very, very passive. Hmm. I should turn it up because this one's really quiet for some reason. It's very quiet. Uh, but yeah, just turning it up because the players are very passive. And by that I mean like they don't go out of their way to do a lot of things. They don't build necessarily things for their characters to do. They don't have a lot of personal goals, or they might have personal goals because it's very much sort of like that. People who got into this sort of like transition of D&D from war game to theater kid energy is that they might have all these ideas for their special character. I feel like we come across a lot of characters and players now who really have main character syndrome and who have these grandiose ideas for their character, but kind of won't put in a lot of work to make that, to manifest that, to make that happen. They're like, well, I have these ideas for my character, and then they just kind of sit back and they're like, all right, DM, present it to me. That is kind of the feeling that we get, and this I think this jives very well with the last Matt Colville video where he talked about sort of the DM problem. It's like it's not necessarily the DM problem; it's that the players, and this has kind of always been different because players are through the editions are different. The game's focused on different things, but now it's like the players. I hate to say it, players kind of suck. Like they kind of suck. They're like, I want a great game, but I refuse to put in very much, if any, energy to make that happen. You know, I've had a player in my current campaign who's like told me, I don't know, 3 or 4 weeks now that like, oh, they're gonna message me to ask things about the deal with the entity that they've got going on. No, it doesn't do that. It's sort of like once they exit the room where we play D&D, they exit the front door. Like no thoughts about D&D till he shows back up. And that's not. I don't want to make it seem like I'm being overly harsh on them. It's not like I don't like this person. I do. I like my players. I like them. I play with them all the time. I've been playing with them for years. I do like them, but I do see them want these cool things to happen, but don't put in work to make those things happen. This is something that I'm feeling across all the players in my current campaign who want these things, these cool things to happen, but they're not really doing anything to do that. And that was one of the things that I really struggled with when I talk about this sort of active players versus passive players, and having players that have goals and are interested in going after and pursuing those goals and making those things happen for their character. They're actively following up on things. When I'm in town, I'm asking people about this. I'm trying to get this information. I'm trying to do these things. And other players who just aren't. And like I said, I don't want to be like none of my players are not. All of my players are doing nothing. That's not true. Some of my players are doing some things, but and I don't. It's unreasonable to think like they're doing it all the time, but it is sort of an issue that I'm coming up from. And we set up with the idea of the campaign very early on, being like, oh, this is going to be a very player-driven character. We did this very long session 0. You guys have all this backstory information, all this information about your characters, all these sort of personal things that are going on with your character uh, that they can chase after or run away from. That I can pull on strings as a dungeon master and be like, this is how it's related to your character, stuff like that. But it's like after that session 0, for a lot of my players, that idea has just kind of flooded their mind. And we have, I think, also piggybacking off of the passive and active players, I have. So one of the things I did for this last session is this guy. This is the remainder. So basically, I did a little. If you've never made a handout like this before, where you can make sort of an aged paper kind of look. This was just a tea stain. And you grab a piece of paper and you stain it with tea. You take a tea bag or wet tea bag. You just kind of run over it a few times, and it kind of gives that old brittle parchment kind of style. And then you can write on and fold it up and stuff. There's other ways to do it. You can do coffee. You can bake it, which can be a fire hazard, so you have to be careful. There are different ways to kind of get this age kind of feel to it. But I did that for the handout. It was like, oh, this player took time. They asked this NPC about this thing, and I said that they gave them some instructions on how to get to a place. So I'm like, all right, well, they did it. I think it'll be a cool reward that they'll like. So I was like, I'll make the handout for them and be like, here are the directions that they gave you, and this sort of like age thing, and made it like ripped up one of the edges so it looked like he ripped it out of his own little book or something like that, his own little notebook, and give it to him. And like the players had it, but then like it didn't really get a reception at the table, and it's not like they have to drop their jaws and be like, "Oh my god, this is the most amazing thing ever." It was like it took like half an hour to make. It's not a big deal, and well, longer than that because I had to wait for it to try. But I mean, it's not like I spent all week on it or anything like in between prep sessions. But I was like, when you hand it to the player, and the player's like, "Oh, okay, cool," and then just kind of puts it away, and you're like, "All right, well, I was hoping for a little bit more than that." Just trying to bring something different to the game. So, just note to self, handouts not the thing that the party cares about. Cool. None of my players seem particularly interested in it. Nope, won't be doing that anymore then. uh, so yeah, you have situations like that, and you're like, I'm just looking for a little bit more investment. And it feels like I'm kind of ragging on the same player because that was the same player as sort of wanting, who keeps telling me that they're going to message me outside the game to talk about stuff about their character and then doesn't. So I don't want to make it feel like I'm ragging on that one. It's just that is one of the most recent experiences, so it's just the recency biases of it. Yeah. Sometimes they're running out of money, and in a situation like that, but it's like, when was the last time you guys looked for loot? Like, you guys left the Dark Mantle room and you didn't check for loot. You didn't look anywhere for loot. I think I talked about it in in the last stream, be like, you could have, in the previous session, I had let the artificer try to harvest some glands from this fire-breathing creature, and it's like, maybe you. And I gave them the impetus, but this time I was like, oh, I'm going to see if they do it. And they didn't do it. I was like, you could have maybe seen if there's a way, something you can pull off of these dark mantles that will allow you to cast darkness one time as sort of some sort of like alchemical thing you can make. It was like, that'd be a cool artificer thing. But nope, they weren't particularly. They didn't seem interested in that. They didn't loot anything out of the room. There was loot in that room. There was loot in the pool, but they didn't go into it. They didn't really investigate at all, even after they had been put into it in combat to make it blatantly obvious that like there's nothing bad in the pool that's going to hurt you. The pool is there just to reduce your movement, to make it harder for you to move around the battlefield. Like that's the only reason it's there. And now this music's a little too loud, so we're gonna move that down. It really sucks not being able to adjust my headphones. I gotta figure this out. It's gotta be a Windows driver thing, I assume. It's still pretty loud. There we go. That's gonna have to do. No, let's train bug. But yeah, it's like, well, if you're not looking for loot, like I can't help you. You're not gonna look for the loot. And it's right there. It's not like it's like in a hidden compartment or anything. It's just like you just have to go in the pool and actually investigate the dead skeleton that's in the pool, and you'll find there's a magic item in there. But if you don't go in there, you won't find it. Even though you know that the skeleton isn't doing anything, and you've been in the pool and you know the pool won't hurt you. It feels very much like the campaign's a lot of lead a horse to water but can't make them drink kind of thing. It's like, here you are. You're gonna no, okay, and move on. When I say it's hard to say it this way, but it's like the players aren't taking a lot of responsibility for their own success and enjoyment of the game. I think that's sort of what it comes down to, and I think that's a big difference between this very sort of specifically 5th edition plus this very sort of like people who got brought in by your Critical Roles, your Dimension 20s, your stuff like that. That live play as an entertainment art form is that the way that we enjoy that from a very passive sense as an audience, and I think people think when they're playing it, when they come into it from that perspective, coming into something like D&D, that they expect that they don't have to have a more active role in it. Like that the dungeon master will just sort of fire a volley of content at you, and then you'll be like, and then just cool stuff happens to my character, and I don't have to do anything to make sure that the game's a success. It's like, no, you can't just not think about the game and then show up to the game and then still kind of get distracted and think about other things and not pay attention, show up late for sessions, etc. Like, hey, it's a collaborative thing. Even if we're leaning into sort of that 5e later kind of stage where we're respinning D&D instead of a game, it's collaborative storytelling, which is not. I don't really think that's what it is. At the end of the day, I think it's still a game. It's not. I don't need rules to tell a story with my friends. And if I was going to do something more like that, I'd probably be playing something that's a little bit more like Powered by the Apocalypse engine stuff, where it's like, oh, we just talk until there's something that comes up that matches one of these moves, and then we roll a move and interpret it. Which I think is the thing that I struggle with trying to play things like Ironthorn and stuff like that, because I want it to be a game instead of just telling a story, and then occasionally there's some game mechanics in it. It's just a very different sort of approach, and I think when you set yourself up to say like this is a game, when you put game in the title, tabletop role playing, all those things modify the noun game. So at the end of the day, it should be a game, and so that's sort of how I come at it. It's like it's a game that has all this other cool stuff that's around it that makes it this very specific type of game. But at the end of the day, it's still a game. It's not me and my friends just telling a story together. And then there's like this random injection of chaos, which is the dice rolls. It's like if I wanted to do that, all I need is a GM Oracle. I don't need a full hundreds and hundreds of pages of rules and monsters and all that stuff. I just need like a one-page GM oracle that's like, hey, when you come up against something that feels like there should be the resolution of which is unsure, and that's why we roll the dice, you roll some dice and interpret those results. It's like I don't need a lot of mechanics to do that. I need one mechanic to do that. I need something that allows me to determine how difficult it is and what I roll to resolve that, and try to think of what my chances are of being able to do that appropriately to modify that. That's it. That's all I need. I don't need anything else to do that. Everything else can be kind of hand waved. So, in the end of the day, it's a game for me. It's not. And as DM, I want it to be a more collaborative game and process, and I want that emergent story quality. Like, oh, I set up a situation, and then the way that you guys deal with the situation is the game, instead of me just vomiting a story at you guys that you guys are just kind of there for. It's like if I wanted to write a story, I'd write a story. That's not what I'm looking for. I want to play a game. That's why I bought all this stuff, all the game stuff. I don't know. It's somewhat different. And I'm trying to come to terms. I'm trying to find where the middle ground is between me and my other players, because all my other players are this very sort of a new school idea, and I'm not. I've been playing for a while, so I have a very different feeling about what the game is and what it is not, what it's good at doing and what it's not good at doing. And I don't think it's a great storytelling framework. I don't think it does that very well. I'll be real honest. I think anything can be a good framework if you take the time, but that's a lot of like DM work behind the screen, especially if your players aren't really helping you to like make the session great. That's a lot of stuff that you've got to do. So that's an unfortunate thing. So that's sort of the situation that I'm in. And then we also have another thing that kind of comes up very often, primarily pulled out by one player. And yeah, I think this is a good discussion. I should talk about each of my players individually. And sort of issues. This sounds like a bitch session. That's not what I'm trying to do here. I'm not trying to do that. I'm trying to just sort of, for you and for myself as a dungeon master, look at my campaign and look at the players I have around the table and the struggles that I'm having with them as a whole, and then individually, and maybe what I can do once I understand the problems. I can elucidate the problems better. I can start to manage, like, okay, how do we course correct some of the stuff? How do we find a middle ground, a compromise, a way to do this? How do I make this work, essentially? So one of the ones, and I brought it up because one of the things that say here that is a consistent refrain of the first dozen sessions of this campaign from specifically this one player is, why are we together? That's true. We built this up. The only sort of meniscus kind of holding them all together, the membrane holding them all together as they came into this campaign is like, you are all going to this island because you think that this island has something, and I left it very open-ended for them, has something that will guide you along the path of trying to further your own personal plots, your own personal backstory, the things that are going on, your own personal goals. So that's what each one of you has something on the island, and I didn't provide it for you. Again, this is one of the things where it's like, I as a DM don't provide it. It's your plot as the PC, as the player. You figure out what it is. If you want a question or help with something you came, like maybe a place or an NPC, like I can help you with that, but I need you to do some of the lifting. It's your plot. The idea is that you all vaguely know each other, kind of in a roundabout way. You can have a loose connection. Like I made sure that each PC knew at least one other PC that was in the party. And so by doing like a round robin, it's like, okay, everybody kind of knows each other, or at least familiar with one or more people in the group. And so that's why you guys were like, oh, well, we all need to go. It sounds like we all need to go to the same place, so let's just go together. Then that'll make it faster, safer, probably cheaper. Maybe not faster, but safer and cheaper probably than trying to go individually. And then, this player, who is, I will say, our other primary dungeon master for this group, who is like, why are we together? I don't, I don't know. Why are you together? You guys aren't doing a lot of work to like try to like be on each other's side. You're not really talking to each other about the things you're trying to accomplish on the island. You guys are all playing it very close to the vest, which is not helpful. It's very much got that. We talk about sometimes, you have that one player in a group who's like, I'm the edgy loner. It's like, but you can't all play that. If you all play that, then nobody's going to be together. And they have done that a little bit, and so they need to do a little self course correction for that. Like, that's not really something I can do, except to just straight out tell them, it's like, hey, you guys, if you guys want to play together, then you guys got to figure out a way to stay together. And again, this is a very new school versus old school thing, where it's just like, yeah, obviously as a player, like I think about a character that I played in a campaign with that guy, with that person as a DM, and we're like, oh, you're all prisoners. Okay, but once we get out of prison, why the heck would we stay together? It's like, no, I came up with a reason. Oh, I'm going to help you. Oh, you're traveling in the direction. Well, that's also my old city, so obviously I'll travel in that direction. So I'll help you with your things once we get there, and then I've got my own stuff to do. Very, very, very simple. Like, it's very simple to do, but like that onus is on me as a player to be like, I have to figure out some way for why my character stays with these people. Especially as they've broken out of prison, and some of them are like falsely accused and stuff. And it's like, no, my guy did the stuff. He did all the things that he's accused of. Like, he's not a great guy, but he had. I can come up with a reason for why he sticks around with these people, especially if they're heading in the direction that he wants to go to. So that makes it very easy. Like, but you do have to do, as a player, you're expected to do some lifting on your own. You can't just be like, well, the DM doesn't make the story for me. It's not all their responsibility. You have to do. It's your story. You have to do lifting in your own story. So yeah, for the reason why you're together, I don't know, man. You got to tell me. I don't know why you're together. You guys don't have that galvanizing event. I didn't start you all off in prison like it's an Elder Scrolls game. You guys were going to an island to find something. You guys are now on the island. None of you have really looked a lot for the things you're looking for yet. One or two of you have. You've looked somewhat, but you guys also are just kind of like dicking around on the island. So that's why you haven't leveled up, and that's why you haven't gone anywhere in your personal plot. You have to like, you got to go do it. That was sort of, and now that was the beginning of the campaign. Being like, oh well, because we set the guidelines out very clear in the beginning. So like, it's going to be a very player-driven campaign because that's the way that I like to run my campaigns. And then we got, what, like 8, 9 sessions in, and they're like, like, oh, that sounds like work, and we don't want to do that. It's kind of essentially the feedback that I got. They said it in a more roundabout, different way, but that is kind of what it boils down to. Is like, oh, I don't want to do the work. Ah, okay. So then I have to vomit plot at you, which is not a thing that I like to do. So now I'm trying to get there, but then it's also difficult. Like one of the characters in the game has a quest item, and the player character's had it for a handful of sessions now, and hasn't even pulled it out of the bag that it's in. I'm like, you got it. I can't make you. You know what? It's fine. It's fine. It's fine. I don't care. I had to construct a way in this new dungeon I'm running for them a reason why that thing was going to happen. I had to go out of my way to, basically Deus Ex it. And I don't like doing that, but I'm going to have to do that. I have to create a situation because, like, otherwise, you're not going to do anything with this. I don't know why. I don't know why the curiosity doesn't get the better of you. Whatever. Um, so yeah, that's sort of the thing. And that's a refrain specifically from my one character I'm pointing to this direction because that's usually where they sit next to me. Uh, I mean, like, why are we together? I don't know. I don't know. But there is a thing where they say, if you've ever heard the advice that doctors make the worst patients, it's very similar when they say that dungeon masters sometimes make the worst players. And And this is a player. He's like constantly splitting the party. He'll run off on his own. He just did it in the dungeon in this last session. He just did it. Was able to make his way back before something bad happened, but now they're going to have to deal with something bad happening because of it. So yeah, that's that. He has a very different, or I should say they have a very different. What they want out of D&D is they want like soap opera drama. Specifically, they want like party soap opera drama. And I'm like, no, it seems very clear that nobody else is really interested in having that. So you're just kind of like trying to drive more divisiveness and create distance between player characters so they can bite back at each other. And I'm like, that's not. As a party that's barely together, that makes even less sense. And it's the person who keeps bringing up, why are we together? I don't know, man. Maybe if you don't feel like you belong in the party, you should wander off and come back with another character who would make more sense in the party. Like you have to find a way for your character to be part of it. You can't keep pulling away from the group and then expect the DM and the other players to provide the elasticity to pull you back in while you're constantly trying to pull away from the party. That's You're creating your fun at the detriment of everybody else's fun because they're like, now we've got to stop everything that we're trying to do and try to be like, no, no, we definitely want you to be part of the party and want you to be here and part of the group, even though you constantly go off by yourself. You won't tell us what's going on with your character, and you're not really a team player. But we want you, right? It's like, but this is also a player that I played through, and I played with other people like this before, who kind of always play the same character, kind of. They kind of, it's like they haven't figured out whatever they want out of that character archetype yet, to where they can expand their horizons to play something else yet. They always kind of play this instigator. I go off on my own. I don't trust anybody. I don't stay with a group. I'm very much sort of like this edgelord loner thing, and that just doesn't work very well in a group game. Uh, and so, uh, and it doesn't seem like the amount of times they get punished for doing that changes that. So that is that player in their deal. Now, the nice thing about that player, I will say, is that they are one of the ones that is actively trying to understand things about what's going on with their backstory and stuff that's happening with them. They are one of the few that's trying to sort of deal with that stuff. Next up is a player that I've already been talking about a lot. Well, actually, I'll send that because they usually sit over there. So we'll go with the player who's playing the cleric. Again, the person who's probably put in the most, not probably, has definitely put in the most work outside of the game to be like, hey, I want a better understanding of the religion. I want a better understanding of my position in it. And here's some stuff in the backstory. And the only bad thing about his backstory, or their backstory in general, is that they want to play a character with amnesia. So I have their backstory, but they don't have their backstory. So it's hard for them to investigate. And then you're like, the only investigation you can do is like, how do I cure amnesia? Which they haven't really done a ton of yet. They haven't really investigated that at all. They're trying to figure out some of the stuff. They've got some totems. They've got some other sort of like knickknacks that are tied to them that they don't really understand what it is. But they haven't done a lot of investigation there yet. But they are the one who is doing the stuff. They're the one that's increased the most with the world building. They've had their own sort of like special connection with an NPC. They're the person who is probably the most kind of dived headfirst into the setting, which I really appreciate. I really appreciate a player who is going to lock into the setting. And it's like, hey, there's this rich setting for you to get into and really investigate and really kind of start to figure out and understand what works with it and uh, how does it tick and what place can your character hold within that world and understand how everything works. So they do a great job about that. Player who's not particularly tactically minded. Probably, I'm not sure if I'd say the least tactically minded, but definitely not the highest. Uh, which is tough when they're the person who is playing a support role. And they're like, because I feel like a lot of support role, you do kind of have to be a little bit more tactical about knowing when and what to do on your turn uh, as a supporter, as a support class. But yeah, and other things that I have to say about that. Uh, I'd say I think the thing that holds that character back is that I think that they have, or that player back, is that I think they have good ideas, but they don't always know how to get there. Like they have ideas about stuff that they want, but then they kind of get hit with, I don't know if it's analysis paralysis or stuff comes up in there. They're just like they can't see a clear path to what they're trying to get to sometimes. And I don't know how much of that is. I don't know how much of that is like inexperience with the system. That's definitely, I should say that they I think are the newest player to D&D. So I don't know how much of it is inexperience with the system that they're going to, and this is only Cleric's a big jump because they were playing a rogue before in the previous campaign, so it's a big jump in trying to learn how to be a spellcaster and all that stuff. That's a big jump. I'm trying to learn that, so I don't know how much of it is that, how much of it is there. Sometimes I feel like maybe it's a like a self-confidence issue, something, and so I try to be like they tend to be a little bit more quieter of a player too. So I'm like, I try to make space for them to be like, what is the thing that you're doing? You tell me what we do. This is your time to talk. And I try to do that, but probably not as successful as I could be. So I can try to do a little bit better about that, but it is hard when you're trying to wrangle a full table of people. But yeah, not much about that. I just want them. I think that my only issue with that player is that I want them. Like I said, I think there's a maybe it's confidence. I want them to be a little bit more decisive about doing stuff and a little bit more thoughtful about stuff. They're the person who kind of made things more difficult in that Dark Mantle fight because of the way that they were using light as a spell. And I was like, they're. But that you can chalk that up to maybe newbie mistakes. And I don't know if this is the first spellcaster they played. I don't think so. I think they played the spellcaster, or maybe in a one shot or something, or in a short adventure. But there does seem to be like some like little unsureness. Be bold, be decisive, be confident. You'll get there. You're gonna make mistakes. It happens. You just try to do stuff. If you don't know, you can always ask somebody. You can. I'm not one of those DMs that's at the table usually that's like, who really will be like, no, you can't have like no above table conversations. Be like, I think it's perfectly fine to be like, hey, this is what I'm trying to do. This is what I'm thinking about doing on my turn. Does anybody have a better idea? Is there something that I'm missing? Like, I think that's fine. Like I said, I play, especially as somebody who plays as a pretty tactical DM. I'm like, I think it's fine for you guys to have that conversation because my monsters sometimes coordinate. I don't think that's unreasonable that you guys have some amount of coordination too. If you can be like, oh, I'm not sure what to do on my turn, does anybody have a better idea? And sometimes I'll jump in and help you and be like, okay, yeah, what do you got? What kind of spells do you got? Like, hey, you could give this person the help action, or you could try to move them, or uh, just try to give them some other options, trying to give them some ideas of things that I think might be good without being like, you have to do this on your turn. And I don't want that at my table either. But something in the middle, something that's like, here are some ideas if you don't have a good idea for this turn, or if you're not sure what to do, here's a couple of ideas. It's some things you could do, depending on how you want to play your character. So yeah, I'd say out of all my players, that's probably the one that I kind of have the least amount of gripe with. Most of that's just like inexperience, and the only way to get over it is to get through it. And so the only way to do that is to play the character and keep going. And I think the other players around the table are being helpful, that they are trying to guide them where they need to go. So down at the end of the table is our missing person. So we have a person who did this thing, came in, they're playing a druid, and only played like a couple of sessions and then went out. Yeah, I think they've only played like 2 sessions with it, maybe 3, uh, and they're out of it. Like I said, they had a scheduling conflict. They're going to come back, and when they come back, they might only be playing every other week. So I pretty much kind of written them off. Like I can't do anything plot wise with you. I can't really focus a lot on your backstory, which is fine because that character definitely has the least amount of backstory, and that's just the player they are. They want to hop in. They've got that very sort of big theater kid actor energy where they're just like, this is my character and I'm going to play my character, which is totally fine. Totally agree with it. And but they're like, I don't really need a big plot or anything. I just want to goof around with my friends and go on some adventures and stuff. I'm like perfectly reasonable way to play the game. Totally on board for it. What I like about their style of play in that is they don't do it in a primarily they don't do it in a disruptive way. They're also like the one of the only players who's like, in addition with the previous cleric, who's like, oh, I'm going to talk to this NPC and I'm going to figure out what's going on with them and I'm going to try to make their life better and do that. So we had 2 characters who ran off. Jumping back, they had this issue that showed up in a small village where we had this issue where it's like, oh, there's a kid that's missing. They were the person who was like, oh, I'm going to go talk to the parents about the kids the parents who seem clearly distressed, find out the kid's missing, bring it back to the group and be like, hey, there's a kid missing. They're probably just around the village, but we don't know where they are. They're missing. And then it was them and the cleric, I think, who decided to run off. And then the other 2 were like, we're not doing that. We're trying to get out of this town. And that's sort of the style of play. And immediately we've seen the group split up so many times because they very rarely agree on what they should be doing together. And it's really difficult to try to GM because I always feel like I'm GMing 2 to 3 smaller groups instead of one large group because they do not stick together, which is both a safety thing. Like again, when I talk about like not being particularly tactical players, like sticking together is a thing that's important in D&D, especially when you're going with people who don't have the skill sets who are qualified to do the thing that you're trying to do. Now in this case, they absolutely had the skill sets. The druid and cleric together, both wisdom-based characters. If you're trying to find somebody, that's a lot of perception and survival checks for tracking. It's like, yeah, they can find the character, and then talk to that character, that NPC, no problem. They're gonna be able to do that. Now, are they the most charismatic characters in the world? No, but they are symbols of authority, being adults talking with a child, and they're both wisdom-based, so they're both quite wise and reasonable characters. So they're able to sort of come at it from that perspective. And so they got to do the fun thing while the other 3 like made a meal and played cards and sketched on an idea or trying to come up with an idea for a firearm for their gun, the artificer. And now we move over to those other 2 characters. So that character's going to come back in, but they're going to be in and out. And given how combats have kind of gone in this campaign, I probably won't adjust the combats. I don't. I think it'll be just easier if I don't, rather than trying to readjust the combats and then I'll make them harder, and then just knowing when that player's going to be able to show up. So I'm not going to do that. I think I'll probably just keep it simple and like, yeah, you guys can just beat up these monsters a little bit easier, rather than that'll make the combats easier without me having to readjust them. So if I always adjust for 4 players instead of 5 players when there are 5 players, things will just be a little bit easier, which is good. They could probably use the help. You also could use the help in a lot of other ways, because nobody else is trained in like survival and nature, and they've done a lot of walking around in the like marshes, and it's really difficult to get around, and those are skills that would be really useful that they don't have with them in the party. Which makes sense. The rest of them they're all city dwellers, so it makes sense they don't have those skills. But it does kind of influence, and that's one of the things I wanted to do with the first level party. Is like, I can't throw just combat after combat after combat at you because you guys can't handle that. You'll die. So I have to come up with challenges that are difficult in a way that don't do hit point damage to you. like things like getting lost, or you get exhausted, or you lose some gear, having to come up with other alternative things to get around. Moving on is our character over here who's playing the fighter, the slave soldier fighter. Really has done very little as far as their backstory. Not really strong backstory. They have probably the strongest clear motivation of any of the characters, though. They know what they need to do. They have 2 years to do it, and we've played a dozen sessions. They really haven't gotten anywhere with it. Like they basically have to get a petition, a signature list of good deeds they've done, people who will vouch for their capabilities and good standing as a person in the world. They take that back to their mercenary company, the people who own them, because they are a slave soldier. Uh, they present that they can basically have their bondage erased. They will be a free person after that, and uh, that allows them to some mobility within society and things to do and ways to go. So they have a very clear thing. They know what they do. They just need to go out and do good deeds and get people to sign off that they did good deeds and they're capable fighters. That's all they need to do. Man, that should be really easy motivation for a player to like go out and adventure. And just, this player is, they're just not that kind of player. And the best way I could describe this player is they are very much a beer and pretzels style player. They're like, oh, I want to show up, I want to kick down some doors and kill a couple of orcs, get some loot, and then we'll do the same next week. That sound good? Yeah. So they're interested in that, but that's like having these dungeons where they have to use their brain a little bit or understand, have any skills about talking with people, anything that's not super combat oriented. They kind of struggle with. And we've seen that. This is the character who's got the plot-centric item, who's had it for 3 sessions now. We're going into our 4th session since they've had it. Has not even pulled it out of the bag yet. They're like, come on, man. I need you to do something with that, please. I wish maybe you hadn't been the person who got it, but you were the only person who went looking for it. And so you were the only person who got it. Just on a whim. Mainly, somebody else would have gotten it, but you were they rolled very poorly on their search for it. And you happen to roll decent, so you got it. So, yeah. But I've come to terms with that player. I feel like I understand that they're not going to really be following up on the character's goals. And so that's fine. If the worst that if the player is like the same like our middle player, the worst they can do is just show up and have fun. Show up and have fun. That's fine. I think it's maybe the other players who want more out of the game but don't put more into the game, which is really the issue. Because I think my other 2 players, they would be perfectly happy if they rolled up and had a hot springs shopping episode, or if they had a dungeon crawl where they just kicked in doors and slew orcs. I think both of them would be perfectly happy playing either one of those kind of game styles, and you can fluctuate in between it. You do some dungeon delving, you come out, you spend a week or 2 on the town, you do some carousing, you speak with things, you maybe do some cool like social adventure, maybe some street stuff, some sort of wilderness adventure maybe, and then head back to the dungeon. I think they would be perfectly happy playing in that sort of like circular style game, and I'd be happy to run a game like that. Like it's very clear what we're doing. We know what we're doing. Everybody's happy with what we're doing. Perfectly job. And then probably the player I'm struggling the most with right now is our last player, which it feels like it's kind of gotten the short end of the straw with most of the criticism, and that's not entirely unduly, but also recency bias. They are one of the ones who does make moves, though. So I will say that is a feather in their cap. They are one of the ones that, as an instigator, also plays an instigator. Is also like the one who did the cooperage attack or the cooperage stuff that went sideways. They're doing that stuff. Like they're making moves. They're taking swings. I appreciate that. I appreciate that out of a player. They are the player who is going after something. Now, none of that stuff has anything to do with their backstory, so there's that aspect. But I have stuff tied with them, but they are the one who I think is struggling the most at first level. I think some of it's self-inflicted frustration too, because they decided to build a character and they only took one combat spell. Uh, and I'm like, I can't help you with that. If you only take one combat spell, you only take one combat spell. Sorry. And it's still, at the end of the day, it's still a D&D game. So now, of course, they could always ask to redo some of their character, and I probably would allow that. I might even, I don't know at this point if I want to. Maybe on level up in general by the rules by raw, you're able to swap out some spells and stuff like that. So maybe they'll do that. If not, I'd let them do it. But I feel like we're close enough now. Maybe if they got back from this adventure and they didn't level up for some reason, if they abandoned the dungeon again or whatever, I'll let them swap some stuff out. But yeah, very that character very money motivated. They want to be like a scoundrel and stuff like that, and that's fine. And the only issue I have with that is that it doesn't seem like anybody else in the party necessarily wants to play that style of game, which is neither here nor there. And it's neither good nor bad, but it is. I feel like we have a lot of people around the table who are not on the same page about what kind of game they want to play, and sometimes you're like, I don't know, were you guys just like not paying attention when I told you the style of game that I was going to run? Or you guys, I feel like this is again, none of my players are particularly experienced. They've all been playing a while, but they've only played like 5th edition, and they're not familiar with the other styles of play, and I don't think they've ever played a game like this before. So much that, right, I have to basically change the style of game that I'm running to accommodate them because I can't. We had a discussion about it. It's just like they're just not gonna do that. I'm like, all right, well, if I have to spend all my time focusing on the main plot of the campaign, you guys' is like side stories, like personal backstory stuff, probably not gonna come up a lot because I got to focus on the running of the game, which feels very similar to my last character that I played in my other game, where we have somebody else who's DMing. And that character's backstory really didn't come up. It really kind of got shoe-tailed in right at the end of the last campaign, um, kind of doing their backstory stuff. But I think I was also the only player who really had backstory stuff. I wrote like a page, maybe a page and a half of backstory, to be like, oh, and it was only longer because I wrote it in first person, uh, where I talked about that, and so that was fun. Now in the second campaign, my character does have some backstory. I wrote less because so much of that stuff didn't come into the first campaign, so I wrote less, but it's coming up more in the second campaign, which is nice. And I feel like each character kind of has something kind of going on, which is really nice. And the DM's done a really good job of trying to make space that for each of us to kind of figure stuff out for each of our characters. Except for, I would say, except not an exception, but the least is probably one player who hasn't done a ton of stuff. But I think we're going to start dealing with that more probably once we finish up this current arc we're on. Then we're going to head off that way. Uh, but yeah, I mean, it's very funny to run a game and then in a couple days later playing a game that's so vastly different. And so, like I said, in the first campaign, we don't really have anybody who's tactically minded. They're not really on the same page about stuff and stuff like that. And in the second group, it's like, is there any reason for these characters to really be together at this point? No, not really. I gotta be honest. Like, I don't think any of our player characters particularly care what's happening under the seas. That's very nautical campaign, and we spend a lot of time underwater. And don't really care about what's happening to the civilizations that are under the water, but we're doing it. Like that's just part of what you do as a player. You're just like, oh yeah, I have to find out a way for this to be important to my character. Why does my character care about this? It's kind of tough for my character because my character is like, he doesn't really care about that, but he does care about. I think he cares a lot about freedom, and I think he can dovetail that in. He can make that work, like fill that gap with that feeling as to why he cares about this stuff. Uh, and I think we've all done that in a way. But he's like, otherwise he doesn't really care about what's going on in the water, except he's a heroic guy in his own way. And he's like, it's the right thing to do, so I do the thing that's the right thing to do. That's just kind of his character style. He's like very different from my last character, who was definitely not that way. This character is like, I do it because it's the right thing to do, and I believe that that's if you have the power to do the right thing, you should do the right thing. Even if it comes at some personal cost to you, which are hurt, injury, trauma, uh, all that sort of stuff. But he's like, I have the power. It's the right thing to do. I'm going to do it. I'm a person in this position. Nobody else can help these people, as far as I can see. I'm trying to get other people to help them, but that's what I'm going to do. And that's a very different way from my current group. And also similarly, in the group in the game that I'm playing in, those players, like two of our players, here's the thing. So two of our players are pretty tactically minded. We're just built that way, and we're pretty tactically minded, which helps because the DM's somewhat tactically minded too. And so we focus in on that. We're also doing a lot of political intrigue and stuff, and two of our characters are very into that. Well, one his character is way more into that, but my character has insight on that and wants to be a part of it, if only to rein in his character. And then we have our third our third player who is not into either of those things. Our third player is very much just a slayer, wants to kill monsters, and an actor like wants to play their fun, goofy character. Uh, Not goofy in a derogatory sense, like goofy, like they're fun. Her character that she's very fun. The character is very fun, and we like that. And we want to make sure that we also like jump in and do those acting scenes with her, uh, especially because there's like an age difference. Like you would have to be like, in if this were the real world, there are two adult men with a teenage girl taking care of a teenage girl. They are left alone with a teenage girl they are not related to. Like in the real world, that would be like alarm bells everywhere. And here they're like, oh, she just calls us like her character calls our characters her papas. We're like, oh, yeah, I guess we're in charge of this kid. With neither of us are really prepared for this role, but we're gonna do it, I guess. Uh, so we've got this very sort of like weird blended postmodern family thing dynamic kind of going on. It's very oh gosh, what's that stupid movie with Gutenberg and Tom Selleck and who else is in that movie? What's it called? Like My Three Dads or something like that? What is it called? That's gonna bug me if I don't look it up. Is it 3 Men and a Baby? What am I thinking of? Yeah, 3 Men and a Baby. Yeah. I didn't know it was directed by Leonard Boyd. That's hilarious. I did not know that. Here we go. Yeah, this is what I was thinking of. Super old movie. I don't expect anybody to watch it. Tom Selleck, Steve Gutenberg, Ted Danson was the third. Yeah, so it is. It very much has those vibes. Uh, it's very silly, and it makes the game very fun though. It's very nice. It's a very refreshing departure from what is often very serious political intrigue stuff and war. It ended up being a very war themed campaign, not what we were kind of expecting going in. But yeah, that is sort of the campaign as it is right now. So interesting to say the least. But yeah, I think that's all I really have to say about the campaign. I've got to figure out how to get there though. I have to figure out this thing gap, and I think maybe what I've got to do is I got to kind of drop off worrying about the individual character backstories and just focus on pushing the plot. I push the plot, we're going to get where we need to go since now I'm in charge of the plot, which is not something I particularly like, but we're going to do it. We're going to push the plot, and so to do that, I'm going to have to put that other stuff to the side. And as I put it to the side, I think I'll just have to look for opportunities to figure out why stuff with their backstory is important to the plot. That I'll have to figure out. But yeah, that's it. Sorry, a bit of a rant, probably more than you need to know about my characters in my campaign. Clearly, I've got a little bit of level of frustration. I think everybody's got a level of frustration with this. and mainly because the characters haven't, done anything. That's why they haven't leveled up. So they're angsty for that level up. They feel, I think, pretty beaten down, especially as first level characters, which is not unreasonable. They have gotten the tar kicked out of them quite a bit. But we're gonna get there. I'm just gonna have to drop some of their side hustle stuff and then try to figure out how to work it back into the plot, which is fine. I've already got some notes on stuff that's going to be important to them um, as individual characters and how each individual character is going to tie into the overall plot. Since I just had to sit down and bang that out in, I don't know, like an hour or so. I figured that out. Now it's just kind of getting them there. That's the only other thing that's kind of holding this campaign back right now is the limited play time. So technically, we're supposed to play for about 4 hours. That's our game session. Almost always, at least one person's late. So we often, that 4 hours kind of gets truncated to about three. Uh, and then, there's crosstalk and people talk. The last person that's there, and then people want to know about them. So yeah, three hours about game time. And I will say this is probably one of the slower groups I've ever run for. They just do not make decisions very quickly. And they don't make moves very quickly, which would make you think that they're being extremely thoughtful. Except usually they're not. Usually they're just kind of like, we don't know what to do, which is a very sort of new, like I said, kind of a new style player problem. They're like, the DM didn't put out the like detective vision golden path that we're supposed to walk along, the highlighted path, the yellow paint that we're supposed to use to climb up a cliff. That wasn't outlined to us, so we don't really know where to go. It's like it doesn't matter, just go somewhere. That's all you gotta do. But that's it. Like I said, we're gonna get there. It'll happen. Thanks for listening to me rant about this. And sorry, and if you're one of my players and you watch this, trust me, I love you. Right, we just gotta figure out how to get there. We've got a group of very, very different players with very, very different ideas and things they want to do. And if you are a player who's watching this, I need you to buy in a little bit more on the campaign. That's really all I'm going to ask from you. It's like, make some moves. That's all you got to do. We've got one player that makes some moves. Like, it feels like each individual player does something I really like, and then stuff I don't like, or that I don't think is helpful to the campaign. So if you can maybe borrow that up, I'd say number one, I know I've brought it up to them multiple times. If you guys will not stop, if you guys would stop splitting up, that's also the thing that makes us go through very little content. What makes the game run really slow is if I have to jump back and forth between 2 to 3 different groupings of people, of PCs. So stick together, figure out what you guys want to do, focus in on it, stay motivated. You're gonna get there. You got level 2. It's within your sights. After you dumped out of the first dungeon, it's within your sights. You just got to grab it. You guys are almost there. You're gonna get level 2. Things are gonna get a little bit easier. We're gonna get out of the dungeon now that we have a clear idea of what the plot's gonna be. We'll hopefully we'll trigger a plot item in the not too distant future. I don't know if it's gonna happen next session, but in the next couple sessions, and we're gonna get there. That's it. Thanks for hanging out with me, guys. I'll see you next time, I guess. All right. Bye bye.